This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning. It's 3 minutes after 10. I hope you had an absolutely splendid weekend, and I hope you're ready to get stuck into the stories that I have selected for your delectation. I've started misspeaking. Have you noticed? I just got Israel and Palestine the wrong way round, which is not only verbally embarrassing, it's diplomatically potentially extremely hazardous. Keir Starmer has not suddenly decided to recognise the state of Israel. He's decided to, although that was probably a little bit more recently than many commentators understand or realise, he has decided to publicly recognise the state of Palestine. I think he moved a little early in order to respect Jewish New Year. I read that this morning. I don't have any particular reason to doubt it. It seems feasible to me. But the phone-in will be, how do you greet this news? How do you greet this decision? The Daily Mail has greeted it by becoming a mouthpiece for Hamas, which was certainly an unexpected twist in this saga. Terrorist organisation, hideous terrorist organisation, tries to, as you would expect any hideous terrorist organisation to do, tries to turn it into a victory for them, which of course it isn't. There's well over 150 countries potentially now who recognise the state of Palestine. Are they all to be tarred as Hamas supporters? But the Daily Mail has decided, and other right-wing outlets have decided to become unquestioning propaganda mouthpieces, repeating without criticism or query the latest rhetoric of that terrorist organisation. That's very unfortunate, but as I've said to you a few times, if you backed Brexit, if you backed Boris Johnson, if you backed Liz Truss, if you backed austerity, and if you sat on your hands while the genocide in Gaza was unfolding, your life is now effectively over as a public commentator. You either admit that you've been wrong about absolutely everything, or you double, triple, quadruple down on the horrors that you have helped inflict not only on your own population, but of course much worse horrors on the people of Palestine. Hideous horrors inflicted by Hamas on the people of Israel. But that hasn't stopped many right-wing commentators this morning unquestioningly parroting their propaganda. And yet, of course, on the other side of the political aisle, there will be people who feel that Keir Starmer has not gone far enough, or he has done too little too late. And there is a political tension to his decision. I will never know until he writes his memoirs, and even then we may not. But we will not know for a while whether or not Keir Starmer would have made this decision absent or without pressure from the left of his own party and dissatisfaction, some justified, some less so, with how the entire issue of Israel's activities in Gaza and beyond, of course, have been treated by the UK government. I don't know. I genuinely don't know how much of this is an attempt to mollify. Well, why does it always have to be a negative word, mollify or appease? How much of this is an attempt to recognise the feelings of people to the left of much of his leadership, and how much of it is actually international diplomacy? Because this is not happening in isolation. That's important to remember, I think, as a counter to the idea that it's entirely a sop to the left. The notion that he's doing it for that reason is undermined somewhat by the countries that he is doing it in lockstep with. We'll run through them shortly. And do you know what? I wonder if anyone wants to have a go at this. I'm walking a bit of a tightrope at the moment. I don't know why. I don't know if you've noticed, but being very honest with you about things that I don't know or don't understand is a complete opposite of how I used to conduct myself on this programme, when I was one of those terrible people that's convinced they're absolutely right about everything, despite having half of the facts and none of the insight. So I've started sharing with you my own misgivings, shall we say, about my full understanding of issues. But I don't actually know, as things stand, how many United Nations member states have recognised the state of Palestine, because the latest figure I had was 151. But I know that Andorra, France, Luxembourg and Malta are about to recognise it, probably at the United Nations General Assembly, where Belgium is also likely to sign up, subject to certain conditions. But I don't know where the United Kingdom's decision fits into this figure of 151. There's one reading of the numbers that could have it nearer to 160 by the end of that United Nations General Assembly, out of a total of 193. And the list of countries the 33 countries that are not on that list of recognisers makes for slightly troubling reading, I would have thought, because these countries now, this latest tranche of countries, are very much historic allies of Israel. It's the French President, Emmanuel Macron, who's led international diplomatic efforts to move towards this recognition. And we do so, of course, alongside Canada and Australia, which leaves 1, 2, 3, 4 more, potentially 5 more countries after our recognition has been officially recorded. I'm going to read you a headline that you may have missed at the time. It's a very fateful date. It was published on October the 8th, 2023. You know why that is a significant date, and you will be well aware of what happened the previous day. But I wonder if at first glance you would be able to guess what newspaper it appeared in, or what news organisation published it, because it's an article I've read a few times when I've been trying to get my head around some of the madnesses that have been unfolding diplomatically, let alone militarily. And the headline is this: October the 8th, 2023, so a very sensitive moment at which to explain these historical facts. For years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. What? For years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blown up in our faces. And the explanation provided by the journalist Tal Schneider is as follows. Netanyahu took an approach that divided power between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, bringing Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to his knees, while making moves that propped up the Hamas terror group. The idea was to prevent Abbas or anyone else in the Palestinian Authority's West Bank government from advancing toward the establishment of a Palestinian state. Thus, amid this bid to impair Abbas, Hamas was upgraded from a mere terror group to an organisation with which Israel held indirect negotiations via Egypt, and one that was allowed to receive infusions of cash from abroad. Hamas was also included in discussions about increasing the number of work permits Israel granted to Gazan labourers, which kept money flowing into Gaza, meaning food for families and the ability to purchase basic products. On a scale of 1 to 10, how strong would you say your opinions were about this issue? Okay, that's interesting. And now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how conscious were you of these facts, this context? And have you worked out yet what media organisation published this? Israeli officials said these permits, which allow Gazan labourers to earn higher salaries than they would in the enclave, were a powerful tool to help preserve calm. So there you have it, and there's more which I may share with you in the course of the programme. It's the Times of Israel. It's the Times of Israel that published that on October the 8th, 2023. For years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blown up in our faces. And if you are interested in facts, as opposed to, today, you rely on right-wing media for your understanding of these issues, Hamas propaganda. There's one other thing that you should know, and I fully expect you may well know it, but I always work on the presumption that you can't have too much knowledge. Hamas are passionately opposed to a two-state solution, and so is Benjamin Netanyahu. So if you were to seek to understand why Netanyahu might have chosen to, in the words of the Times of Israel, prop up Hamas for years, you could probably do worse than rely upon the old adage, my enemy's enemy is my friend. So if your enemy is a two-state solution to the historic problems between Israel and the Palestinian people, then anybody else who is historically and passionately opposed to that arguably becomes your friend. It's one of the many reasons why it is miraculous, by any modern measure, that Netanyahu managed to stay in power after the October the 7th attacks. His current engagements, his current bloodthirsty enactments remain passionately opposed, including by senior members of his own military. But he is on that path and he will not be turned from it, which leaves the international community with a huge problem. A huge problem. What on earth can they do to stay his hand? And before you call me, well, call me now and tell me how do you greet this news? 0345 6060 How significant is it? That's the number that you need, because I don't think you can read it or process it without the remarkable speech last week in which Netanyahu urged his country to become a super Sparta of the Middle East. If you don't like the classical references, perhaps a football one would help. He wants to turn Israel into Millwall. Everybody hates us, and we don't care. This was before unleashing that ground offensive against Gaza City on Tuesday. The percentage of people now being killed in Gaza who come from the civilian population is higher than at any point since this war started 717 days ago. And still, you can find the odd caller to LBC claiming that the Israeli military is at great pains to avoid civilian deaths. I've got those statistics for you as well. I shall share them shortly. So he wants Israel to become a more militarized society. He wants to essentially embrace economic self-sufficiency, because after recognition of Palestine, the only path left for the international community is sanctions. Limited trade options will see an increasing reliance on homemade production. And the phrase pariah state, which is one we first used about a year ago on this programme, is now one that you will encounter in much of the coverage of the conflict. The United Kingdom has recognised the state of Palestine. I thought Keir Starmer sounded quite statesmanlike yesterday when he made this speech. And I know that his premiership remains dogged by controversy and problems, but sometimes a leader has to do the right thing. And we can spend hours sifting through the comments, or sifting through the context, sifting through the analyses of why he has done it. We can say with absolute certainty he has not done it to reward Hamas, which is bizarrely, and it ties in with that my enemy's enemy is my friend, that's something that's been claimed by both Hamas and Israel. The two most passionate opponents under Benjamin Netanyahu of the two-state solution that many people see as the only possible path to peace. So when Hamas and Netanyahu claim that this is a victory for Hamas, the best thing you can do is probably ignore both of them and wonder why Keir Starmer has done it. Because it seems to be the only tactic left for the almost entire international community committed to a two-state solution in the Middle East. Absolutely extraordinary how many people, including, I fear, people who do this for a living, would be completely unaware of Netanyahu's history of seeing Hamas as an ally in his opposition to a two-state solution. And not just in this business, plenty of people in UK politics as well. So, simple question, 0345 6060973 is the number. And you can do a little bit of feeling before we move into the facts. And there'll be speculation. There's a shortage of facts when you start wondering about the future. How do you greet this move by Starmer? And what does it mean? 0345 6060973. I suppose you could greet it with great enthusiasm while not having particularly strong views or even high hopes on what it might mean. But it is, not to be underestimated, it is a huge moment for people who recognise the necessity of an independent sovereign state of Palestine. A huge moment. It's epochal. But whether or not it has sufficiently or significantly speeded up the process of that state being established, that state being achieved, I'm afraid the jury's still out. Here is your Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, recognised. Well, you can hear. He'll tell you himself.
I set out in July the terms upon which we would act in line with our manifesto to recognise Palestinian statehood. That moment has now arrived. So today, to revive the hope of peace and a two-state solution, I state clearly, as Prime Minister of this great country, that the United Kingdom formally recognises the state of Palestine. We recognized the state of Israel more than 75 years ago as a homeland for the Jewish people. Today, we join over 150 countries who recognize a Palestinian state also. A pledge to the Palestinian and Israeli people that there can be a better future.
It's hard to imagine a worse one, particularly for the Palestinian people. So why would you not welcome this move, which defies Hamas's historic opposition to a two-state solution and undermines Benjamin Netanyahu's determination, in lockstep with the terrorists that the Times of Israel described him as having propped up for years, commitment to resisting a two-state solution at all costs? Is this a morning for hope? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 20 minutes after 10, and if you have been marching in solidarity with the Palestinian people over the last few months, then I wonder how you greet this news. Do you a cautious optimism or disappointment at how long it has taken and how little has actually been done? Of course, there are still claims that we are arming or helping at least Netanyahu's forces to conduct their activities in Gaza. Or do you recognise the constraints of this diplomacy and allow yourself a rare moment of optimism about what the future may hold? It's also important, of course, to remember that there were three fairly clear, absolutely clear conditions under which this would not have happened. This is the bit where I don't have a particularly strong line of understanding. The three absolutely clear conditions made it look like a threat, so that the recognition of a state of Palestine would be a punishment for Netanyahu if he refused to promise to, among other things, stop annexing territory illegally in the West Bank. And he hasn't done it. He hasn't signed up to a ceasefire. He was responsible for breaking the last one. The likelihood of him being committed to a ceasefire process was somewhat undermined when he tried to blow up the people who would be conducting the negotiations from the other side of the table. So in many ways, Keir Starmer set a stall out that left him little choice unless Netanyahu changed course entirely and dedicated or demonstrated dedication to a peace process and a two-state solution. Knowing he was never going to do that, this path became inevitable. That's when it gets a little bit more complicated. But I want to know what you think. I want to know how you greet this news, this moment, and the second bit possibly be more interesting than the first bit, but don't hold back on the first bit, what you think it means. 0345 6060 973. Sarah's in Cardiff. Sarah, what do you reckon?
Hello. I'm a bit emotional.
Okay. Why?
I think it was good that they recognised Palestine, but I have a horrible feeling that it is not going to make any difference whatsoever. I think it's deeply sad that it's taken this long to actually make that point, and I think that this war is more about profit than anything else.
Well, I'd probably dispute that. I mean, all wars are in some sense about profit, because such huge amounts of money swill around the place. But for Netanyahu or for people that support him, it's about an existential threat to the modern state of Israel. And in many ways, the Palestinian people who'll be welcoming this news would do so because it potentially makes them safer as well. They're not really thinking about profit. They're thinking about death.
Yes, I know they are. But the thing is, the people who are running, who are profiting, are not thinking about Palestine. All they're thinking about is profit. That's the problem. Right. I don't think that the true consideration of who is suffering is taken into account in this at all.
So what would a better course of action have been then?
I think we need to, for instance, companies like Elbit, stop letting them send.
Yes, in terms of what Keir Starmer can do as an international politician, what would you have liked to have seen?
Well, for a start, put a stop on companies like Elbit.
I'm not familiar with this company.
They are an arms manufacturer.
Right.
Which operates in Britain.
They're not the one that closed down recently.
Pardon?
Are they not the one that closed down recently?
No. They've had several attacks on them, and the protesters have been arrested. I think we need to look a lot deeper into this, because why aren't the people who protest these companies ever interviewed? It's the same as the
well, they're probably
that
if they're under arrest, that you wouldn't be allowed to interview them until the trial was complete. They're awaiting trial, and that's a very easy answer to your question. I don't think we do have to think more deeply about things. Possibly we have to just be a bit more intelligent. That's the law of this country.
I don't know.
I do. So I'm sorry if that's news to you, but if someone is awaiting trial, you can't conduct a conversation with them. Anyway, I remind perhaps of the question that I'm actually asking. How do you greet the news of Keir Starmer recognising the state of Palestine, with various caveats, including, of course, an insistence that Hamas will never have any role to play in the future governance of Gaza? Can expect more sanctions on Hamas in due course. Demands for the release of hostages go without saying in these kind of contexts, but, of course, the fact that many hostages remain in Gaza is, by many people in Israel, including many but not all hostages' families, seen as a consequence of the tactics that Netanyahu has adopted so far. How historically significant is this moment? I mean, that's the fear, isn't it? That it is just words and fury signifying nothing. 151 countries before this even happened have recognised the modern state of Palestine, have recognised the state of Palestine, and it doesn't seem to have done a single thing to prevent the carnage that we've seen in Gaza most recently. 10/26 is the time, or indeed the horrific attack upon Israeli soil undertaken by Hamas on October the 7th. Robert is in Goudhurst. Robert, what would you like to say?
Goudhurst, yes,
Goudhurst.
Thank you.
You say Goudhurst, I say Goudhurst. Tomato, tomato. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind? How to move this business forward.
Yes.
The recognition of two states is a correct move. However, why not recognize the Palestinian state that is more moderate, which is in the West Bank, and leave the Gaza for now, which is insoluble?
Well, they did. I heard the Foreign Office Minister on with Nick this morning. I'd had a look at the maps that are on the Foreign Office website, and the West Bank is included in this recognition.
No, West Bank is the more moderate part.
Because I know what it is and where it is, but the recognition of a modern state of Israel would include of Palestine would include the people currently living there.
Well, my argument is that the problem is recognizing a state in Gaza which voted democratically, albeit in a non-democratic way, voted for Hamas.
Well, you can't do both. You can't only recognise the West Bank. I mean, it's about the Palestinian people, isn't it? An identifiable population.
Yeah,
it's the reason why the United Nations Commission was able to establish that genocide had been committed, because they are a homogenous, if that's the right word, people, a homogenous population.
Well, it's not homogenous, because part of the Palestinians voted for Hamas, and the other part. Yes,
but a genocide isn't decided by how people vote. It's decided by who people are.
But this question is about what do you recognise, and by recognising a more moderate state.
Yes, but I've just told you they are recognising that. There's no reason why you should have known that. I don't think Nick did until the government minister explained it to him.
No, I know they're recognising both, and I think that's the problem. Because
so they shouldn't be recognising Gaza. They should only be recognising the West Bank.
Correct, for now, because the West Bank can be a successful enterprise, and the population in Gaza would change their mind from supporting Hamas.
Right. And how would they do that?
Achieve better. Sorry?
How would they do that?
By being successful and
No. How would they register their opposition to Hamas?
Well, you can't solve everything in one go.
No, I know, but just like a starting point, how would they do that?
The starting point is...
Why do you think Hamas haven't allowed them to have an election for 20 years?
Well, exactly, because
Because
Hamas
they're probably not going to get the result that they want if they did, which suggests that the opposition you're calling for might already be there. So I'm wondering how it could be articulated in the absence of elections.
Well, what I'm saying is that this formula presents a more extreme existence between two countries that neither recognizes a two-state solution.
Yes, except that we do. So the question is about what we should do. And Keir Starmer has decided to recognise the desirability, if not the inevitability, of a two-state solution. A question is, how do you greet Keir Starmer's decision to recognise a state of Palestine and what it might mean? I mean, fair play to Robert. I haven't heard that angle before, that they should only have recognised the people living in the West Bank and not the Palestinian people living in Gaza. God knows what message that would send to the current and ongoing victims of genocide. But all views are welcome. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. 10:30 is the time. And Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 33 minutes after 10, and it is not, I say with the greatest of respect and affection, it is not so far one of those days where the quality of calls to this programme on matters Middle Eastern supersedes even some of the expert opinion and commentary that you might find on other radio stations. But it's Monday. Plenty of time to give your head a wobble and provide me with some thought-provoking and indeed thoughtful contributions to a conversation hinging upon the question of how significant is the UK's government, and of course plenty of other governments as well, latterly deciding to recognise the state of Palestine. I think it's best understood, if there really is any confusion, as a people's right to exist in sovereignty on their own land. So if you recognise the nature of a Palestinian population and the fact that that population currently inhabits land that is separated, then bringing it together under a single umbrella as a state is literally recognising a people's right to exist in sovereignty on their own land. To oppose that, of course, is to say that there is no right to exist in sovereignty on your own land, which Hamas would say about Israel and which Benjamin Netanyahu would say about the Palestinian people. So the role of international diplomacy, the role of international politicians, the role of people trying to walk a tightrope of allyship with both populations, if not leaderships, is to do exactly what Keir Starmer has done. But it's obviously not enough, because the killing isn't going to end today. If indeed it had ended when Keir Starmer laid down his preconditions in July, then it's possible this recognition of Palestine would never have happened. So how do you greet it, and what does it mean? 0345 6060 973. Ben's in Skegness. Ben, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'd just like to say that I think it's a good thing. I think it provides legitimacy to the Palestinian people. However, I don't think it's going to make any difference, unfortunately, because I think Israel still has, the fully supported backing of the US. I mean, the US recently vetoed a ceasefire at the UN.
Hello.
You might remember him from last time I spoke to you.
Sweet. I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? Because there are reports of Trump being incredibly frustrated with Netanyahu, but we're not analysing normal diplomatic or political relations, are we, when we talk about Donald Trump? So it doesn't really matter what he's reported to have done on a Monday.
If you want to go down a conspiracy theory route, you could sort of...
let's not.
Yeah, let's not.
I'm just saying that he has reportedly expressed dissatisfaction with what Netanyahu is doing, but what does that mean? He's expressed dissatisfaction with what Vladimir Putin is doing, but he's done absolutely nothing to hold the hands of either. Why is it better than nothing?
I think it sets a precedent for other countries to follow suit. I mean, obviously we were quite behind 150 countries before us, but it could allow people to make the same decision in future.
And it counters the Israeli, boasting almost, according to one commentator, about killing off the idea of a Palestinian state. So you have Britain and France and Canada recognising Palestine. It's a counter to claims that dreams of a Palestinian state have been dashed since October the 7th. But it's a metaphorical or rhetorical counter, not a deeply meaningful one. That I suppose is what's missing from the conversation. And you can't simply say, well, it must be a really big deal. Otherwise, people on the right wouldn't have gone so bonkers about it, because sadly we live in a world now where people on the right are permanently bonkers. I've got an unhinged headline for you today, which, again, our friends at the Daily Telegraph seem to have taken their foot off the gas when it comes to unhinged headlines. I hope there's not a memo that's gone round saying, can we stop printing unhinged headlines because everybody at LBC is laughing at us. But the Daily Mail, luckily, have stepped into the breach today with a headline that is about as unhinged as it's possible to get, even in this hideous territory. I'll share that with you shortly. Ben, I think someone needs feeding. Malik is in Leicester. Malik, what would you like to say?
Hi there. Good morning to you, sir. And my take is, to be honest with you, I'm in agreement with you. I don't see this achieving anything.
Well, hang on. I think it has achieved a counter to claims and to the increasingly obvious determination of Netanyahu and his allies to resist the formation of a Palestinian state or of a two-state solution. So it is Keir Starmer and the leaders of other countries, the leaders of almost all the world effectively now, except the United States of America, saying, listen, whatever you do, we remain committed to a two-state solution. And we don't know how big a deal that is. And if I was being moved from my tent that I've been living in since my house got blown up to another godforsaken corner of the territory today, I don't know that I'd be feeling particularly upbeat or uplifted by it, but I'm in a better situation than I was in yesterday. Potentially.
Okay. James.
Malik.
Please again educate me. What is when you say state? What is a state? What is a state? Is it just some line on a piece of paper, or that usually state means that it's a sovereign country with the sovereign constitution, with their own currency, with their own army to protect their borders, to safeguard people.
Think of it more as a people's right to exist in sovereignty on their own land. So you have to recognise, before they can do that, you have to recognise their right to do so.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Very, very, very well put, sir.
That's what I'm here for. Here comes the but.
However, I don't believe, and there are many, many, many Muslims in this country, around the world, believe that this idea that is being put forward now will achieve that state. I rather see a greater Israel, West Bank part of it, Gaza part of it, with Palestinians being treated as equal citizens.
Well, you would rather see that, or you think that is more likely to happen?
Yeah.
Which? So. Educate me. I don't know. Are you saying that's what you want to happen, or that's what you think is more likely to happen?
If the ultimate goal or aim should be the people will be treated with respect, their lives have some meaning. They will not be treated as termites, or we refer to that like rats or subhuman, and will be living or forced to live under the subhuman condition and being treated as subservient.
Why do you... I think if we were to compare dreams, then that is obviously more devoutly to be wished for than a settlement between two populations that will never really get on brilliantly well. But in terms of plausibility... I don't think so, sir. The reason why, these are the very people. Look, I understand. If you think what
about
happens
the history,
to the Kingdom of Jordan? Because, all iterations of Greater Israel that I've ever seen involve the abolition of the Kingdom of Jordan. What happens to them?
Well, to be honest with you, I care less about Kingdom of Jordan. To be honest with you, there's no such thing as kingdom in Islam anyway. Right. So if they are not there, what is the purpose of them? So we've just abolished.
It's not a full moon at the moment, is it?
I know. I understand that. You
can't just abolish a kingdom.
Unfortunately, this is what it is, isn't it? That's what I'm saying. So I don't see any point.
Okay, so you want everybody to live in harmony together, but if you're Jordanian, you've got no right to exist. As a Jordanian.
I didn't say that.
As a Jordanian.
I didn't say that.
What did you say? I don't really care about the Kingdom of Jordan, you said.
I don't care. The reason why
you want everybody to live together in harmony, but you don't care about them. who would be living there in harmony.
I don't care
against
about the
their
kingdom.
own wishes.
No,
Holy moly, it's 10:42. I'm going to have to undo all of the commentary that I've provided in recent years about the brilliance of the callers that we get on these. So, or maybe I'm being desperately unfair. And I'm the problem. 0345 60973. What is your reaction to this? Well, you say it's not it's such a fascinating tension, actually. It's maybe part of the problem. So you've got the people who are opposed to it saying it's a really, really big deal. It's absolutely huge. We're rewarding Hamas. It's significant. I've got your unhinged headline, actually, which I'll probably share with you in a moment. Just to get so the people on that side, the people who are not welcoming it, are sort of losing their very fragile grip on reality even more than usual, but B, they're greeting it as something hugely significant and hugely important. The people who are minded to be cautiously optimistic, or the people who have a low-level welcome for it, are all insisting that it's not a big deal at all. And therein lies the problem. So everybody opposed to it insists that it's a moment of absolutely epic significance, and everybody broadly, albeit in favour of it, insists that it's either not enough, or it's too little too late, or it's not going to change anything. Which brings us to...
Unhinged headline.
This is Stephen Glover in the Daily Mail today. Are you ready for this? Starmer's Chagos deal was bad enough, but recognising Palestine could see Britain facing £2 trillion in reparations. So the editor of the Daily Mail, Ted Verity, has such incredibly low regard for his readers' intelligence that he thinks they're going to be frightened by the phantom figure of £2 trillion. Where does that number come from? Let's find out. Let's read down into paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's read further into this article than any Daily Mail reader will probably bother to discover this. No figure has yet been specified, but according to some legal experts, the bill for having ruled Palestine could be as much as £2 trillion, which is getting on for double the entire UK public spending for 1 year. So let's have a look for who these legal experts are, quoted by Stephen Glover in Viscount Rothermere's newspaper this morning. That is Christiana Modern Medicine. Unfortunately, David Lammy is there, Lord Herman, Witless Prime Minister, Hornet's Nest, Mahmoud Abbas, no less important, British Durs, and the answers to all the... No, £2 trillion. They seem to have pulled it out their own bottoms, this figure. I could say legal experts say. Some legal experts say James O'Brien should have 4 zeros added to his salary simply for recognition of how hard he has to work some mornings. Some legal expert. You don't tell me who the legal experts are, then I'm afraid it's almost as if you have gone beyond the normal parameters of Unhinged Headline and need an entirely new category of your own. But for now, the claim that Britain could face reparations, which would be roughly double the entire UK public spending for 1 year, counts as a comment piece in the Daily Mail and an
Unhinged headline.
For everybody else, it's 10:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:48 is the time. We will turn together. We will turn this oil tanker around. I swear it. I swear it. And I think that distillation there a moment ago is pretty key. People who are opposed to Keir Starmer's decision to recognise Palestine are reduced to printing absolute rollicks about Britain facing £2 trillion in reparations. Legal experts say so. I read it in the Mail. They don't need to tell me who it is. There are lots of legal experts who say this. They just go to a different school. And people who are minded to welcome the announcement, to welcome the recognition, are almost unanimous in their belief that it's not enough and or it won't particularly change anything. As is my wont in life and in work, I sit between the two poles. I sit between the two extremes, much closer to the second one than the first one. It is obviously to be recognised, and it is important, and not for the first time. Nesreen Malik, writing in The Guardian, is a great aid to understanding, but it is to her that I turn for this phrase, a cause that is about a people's right to exist in sovereignty on their own land. You've got to hold on to that notion. And then whatever Israel does under Netanyahu, however many more international august organisations and individuals conclude that they've committed genocide, then that remains, that star, that light remains illuminated even in the darkest of times. That is why it is important. But in the context of wanting things to get better tomorrow, It is not a time to break out the party poppers and start toasting Keir Starmer. So what is it a time for? What is it a time for? 0345 6060 973. 10 to 11 is the time. Dale's in Edinburgh. Dale, what would you like to say?
I'm feeling happy that a two-state solution is on the table. But there's a big, massive thing missing from two-state solution, and that's the Americans. And I think I'm still cynical enough to think that Keir Starmer has done the two-state solution, but a week after a £250 billion American deal. You know, it's why wasn't it done sooner? Is that the reason it isn't done sooner? Are we still beholden to the Americans on Palestine?
Well, he said in July when he was going to do it.
And I'm all for it. I'm all for the two-state solution. But at the moment,
he said in July, he set the things in place in July and said if by the time the UN General Assembly comes around, then that is when we would recognise the state of Palestine. And the reason he's moved a little earlier, I'm told, is because out of respect for Jewish New Year. So this particular criticism is not a valid one.
No, it's just something that's behind, that's niggling, if you understand, James.
Yes.
It's not the full solution we want, because we know now we've said it. Are we going to go ahead and do it? And at the back of my mind, I'm still thinking, what are the Americans going to do?
But we've done it. He's made the announcement. The recognition is now a matter of fact.
This is Donald Trump's America. It's not the America that I think some people in government still think is there.
Yeah,
I still think I'll say it again.
The recognition of the State of Israel by the UK government is now a matter of historical record. The State of Palestine by the UK government is now a matter of historical record.
I'm totally with you on that one, James. I really am.
So in a sentence or two or three, what, apart from simply saying we must do more, what are you worried about today?
I'm worried about the backlash on social media and the newspapers, because that seems to be where all the battlegrounds are at the moment.
Okay.
I'm worried. As I say, I'm still worried. As I say, I might go on about it a little bit too much, James, but I'm still worried about the Americans.
Well, so am I. I mean, you know, they're increasingly a rogue state, and the lurch into a form of dictatorship is moving at breakneck speed. But you could, Del, if you'd allow me, you could take what Starmer has done as a positive, even in that context, because it's unlikely. And in fact, I think they said so at the press conference that Trump doesn't agree with this, but Starmer has done it anyway. So that's good news in the context of where the United States is going.
Absolutely. And in that way, I think Keir Starmer played a blinder. But it's the world we live in, James, and that's the problem.
Yeah, no, okay. I'm not going to argue with that. The world we live in is deeply problematic, and our job every morning is to try and make a little bit of sense, if we can, of the madness, and even, dare I say, introduce a little bit of light and levity into such an otherwise dark vista. Dale, thank you. 10:53 is the time. Farah is in Southfields. Farah, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I've actually been listening to all the commentary on LBC, for the last few days, and I just think this is a really positive step. I know it's a small step. Will it change things overnight? No, it won't. But I really do see that this is a level of actual moral leadership, integrity from a Labour government, and a man that I have very little respect for, not just on this issue.
He can't win, can he?
Well, he can't, but, today I've woken up feeling, slightly more positive. And I think, I was somebody who was at the Stand Up to Racism, protest 2 weeks ago. Sorry, riots? Protest 2 weeks ago. And I just think, It is just positive. It's finally seeing the government doing something that they should have done in 1948. And, I think it's...
They couldn't do it in 1948. I appreciate you...
Hang on a second. It was part of the agreement. It was part of the actual agreement that the United Nations actually passed. And by the way, they're all responsible as well. It's not just the British and the Americans.
No, I'm saying Keir Starmer couldn't have done it in 1948.
No, I'm not saying him, but the British government...
You kind of are. I mean,
No.
Okay, but I'm talking about how we greet Starmer's... Let's find a little bit of positive, shall we, here? Because it is a G7 member, along with France, offering up a real and clear alternative to US and Israeli propaganda that conflates Palestinian recognition with rewarding Hamas.
You've just literally said
it's
exactly
your
what I was
fault for
going to say.
wanging on about 1948 and not talking about Keir Starmer.
Okay, well, let's get back to the point, which is that I think it is really positive, and it's literally the only positive thing I can think of right now, because I expect my government to show some moral leadership and integrity. And I think this does say to the Palestinian people that we are listening, that we have righted a wrong. And I see myself very much as British. I have Pakistani heritage, but I see myself as British. That's why I'm on the streets protesting against, what's coming back. And, the other thing is that I think this obviously is a win for Starmer, very much domestically and internationally. And it is finally time he's found a way to stand up to Trump and actually stand up to Israel. And maybe the message of all of these countries coming through, especially Britain, will say to the Israeli public, you need to change, you need to do something. And there's a huge, groundswell and movement that is supporting the peace movement for whatever reason and actually pushing back on this. I see this all over social media.
It's all about what happens
next. Maybe something positive will come up. It's because what will happen
if there's more annexation in the West Bank, if you have a sort of another ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, then what on earth the world will do and how crucial American involvement in proper resistance would be, it becomes a matter of incredible urgency. Do we have any idea, and I don't think I need to apologise for not knowing the answer to this question, but do we have any idea how, for example, a Palestinian person in Gaza would feel today about this?
So, and I can only go on the social media clips that I've seen, is that it was greeted with positivity, and all those people have right now is hope. And the hope is that this is a significant step. It hasn't, I know I'm going to mention 1948, but it hasn't happened since then. And that, I think, is the significance. And James, can I please just give Dr. Victoria Rose's charity just a quick plug?
Give them a slow plug if you want.
Oh, fantastic. So she is a reconstructive surgeon who's been out. She's been in the media a great deal. She represents surgeons, British surgeons that are going out to Gaza, and they are obviously fundraising the whole time. Her charity is Ideals, and one of the charities that actually helps them get out there is Islamic Relief. So if anybody feels that they can't do anything, please donate to them, because this is one of, again, an incredibly British thing, I think, that we do really well, is that we send our medical staff out to the most vulnerable people in the world. And she is absolutely tremendous. And she's engaging with Parliament other than that.
I'm beginning to think you weren't listening to the programme on the two occasions that she sat in this studio with me.
No, of course I was. I even recorded it and shared your thing with all of my friends. And I've met her several times. And she was my reconstructive surgeon when I had breast cancer. So, that's it. So, please, if people can donate. But on this point, I think it's really positive. And for a man that I really didn't have any time for, and I've been a Labour supporter most of the time, I just think he's shown some backbone.
He's got this one right. And I think, actually, that possibly turns the negative into a positive, because he could have chosen a path of less resistance, but he has very much invited abuse for this, up to and including the ludicrous claim in the Daily Mail that there could be £2 trillion worth of reparations on the way. So he's sort of uncorked the hysteria, and he would have known that would happen. And of course, as somebody with Jewish family, including in Israel, on his wife's side, he'll be well aware of the stakes and well aware of the tone and the nature that the pushback would take, which is why you have to conclude he has done what he thinks is right, have the leaders of France and Canada and Australia, and over the course of that period of time since 1948, well over 150 other countries, which sort of makes you wonder why none of them have ever been accused of inviting £2 trillion worth of reparations or indeed supporting Hamas. The time is approaching 11 o'clock. I'm quite stubborn. When a phone-in is a little slow to get going, my personal temptation is always to continue with it. But I don't know. I'll take that under advisement. Two other things that I want to talk about today. The Liberal Democrats are having their conference, and their popularity or lack thereof is a source of never-ending wonder to me, and Ed Davey's leadership as well seems to me to be fascinating.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'd like to do something a bit different now, and it could be one of those ones where I end up looking very silly. Or it could be one of those ones that I boast about for the next 2 years, going, yeah, you see, we were right about that as well. I can't help feeling that there is a growing sense of hackers or cyber criminals or whatever you want to say, enjoying the kind of impunity that we used to associate exclusively with shoplifters. I'm looking at the airports around the world that criminals used ransomware to hugely disrupt this weekend. Several of Europe's busiest airports desperately trying to restore normal operations after a cyber attack on Friday threw their automatic check-in and boarding software into complete disarray. I don't know. I mean, I suppose I'm wondering why this isn't a bigger story. Not just this one, but the other examples of it recently as well. Do you know, I think they're still not making cars at Jaguar Land Rover at the moment. And the reason why I can't say that with complete certainty is that it's not getting the news coverage that you would ordinarily expect. Imagine if there had been physical attacks on UK airports. Let's not delve into the realms of there being casualties. So somehow it would be physical attacks on infrastructure rather than human beings that brought the checking in and boarding software to its knees. So if somebody with a sledgehammer or like 100 people, look, this is where I'm going to sound either stupid or quite prescient. Okay. Imagine if 100 people with sledgehammers got into the computer control centre of major airports across Europe and smashed stuff up physically and brought the ability of the airports to operate normally to a stuttering halt. Okay, how would that be reported? Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Okay, now you've got Jaguar Land Rover, which I think I read this weekend. Some of its suppliers are now laying off staff. If you're on a kind of 0 hours contract or a rolling contract, then you'll be particularly vulnerable. We learned a lot, didn't we, about just-in-time supply chains during the Brexit conversations. Well, some of us learned a lot about just-in-time supply chains. Some people remain in either deliberate or willful ignorance about them. So you know what happens when the production lines grind to a halt. The ramifications go back through supplier after supplier after supplier. And that is still ongoing. The halt in production has hit profits by about £120 million already, with about, according to a professor of business economics at the University of Birmingham, 1.7 billion in lost revenue too. So, plants in Solihull, Wolverhampton and Merseyside have not made any cars this month. I'll say that again, shall I? Jaguar Land Rover has not made any cars this month. That's a fairly big deal, no? The supply chain more vulnerable than the actual firm. He's calling for government intervention. So the idea that you'll have some sort of furlough scheme put in place for the supply chain or some sort of loan guarantee. So there you've got it. Imagine if 100 people had got into a Jaguar Land Rover plant and smashed it up with sledgehammers to the point that they couldn't make any cars this month, and the suppliers of Jaguar Land Rover had started to lay off staff. How would that be reported? I'm not sounding old, am I? I think the distinction sometimes between the virtual world and the physical world is one that needs to be much, much smaller. Imagine if an army of activists or blackmailers, call them what you will, had physically attacked Europe's airports, not people, but machinery, computers, infrastructure, and succeeded in bringing service to a stuttering halt. And then, not happy with that, they'd set their sights on Jaguar Land Rover, a major British automotive manufacturer, and successfully smashed up the production lines in Wolverhampton, Solihull and Merseyside to the point where they haven't made any cars this month, and it's the 21st. And suppliers are already locking people up, laying people off. The reason I'm thinking about locking people up was that if this had been undertaken by environmental protesters, I can't help thinking that the story would have been much bigger. And that brings us, as all the best stories often do, to Marks and Spencer. I don't know how much time you spend in Marks and Spencer, and I don't know how much shopping that you do online, but Marks and Spencer got absolutely kebabbed last month. The inability to pay with a card in store went on for absolutely ages. Goodness only knows what someone will know what the overall cost was, but something as intrinsic to our high street and our online shopping experience being absolutely mullered in real time didn't, again, attract anything like the sort of attention it would have attracted if people had thrown orange powder over the tills in one shop in protest in support of Just Stop Oil. Or if now prescribed groups, so I have to be a little bit careful what I say, but if people had sought to disrupt production at Jaguar Land Rover or to cripple airports or to bring Marks and Spencer's to its knees out of their misguided attempt to show support for the Palestinian people, how would that have been reported? And how would the authorities have responded? I'm not going mad, am I? This is quite an interesting observation, I think. I know what you're thinking. There's a first time for everything. So I'm reminded of the first time that we spoke of credit card fraud and cards being cloned. And it was one of those weird moments where we sort of dipped our toe in a topic and it almost drowned us. It almost overwhelmed us. So many people were having their bank accounts accessed by criminals as a consequence of having their cards cloned. And it wasn't getting anything like the sort of news coverage that you would expect. And we worked out why. And the answer was fairly straightforward, is that the banks didn't want us to panic. So they would just quietly settle almost every single claim without any more fuss or kerfuffle. Because the alternative, loads of people complaining that their money had been stolen and they weren't getting it back, the alternative would have created actual panic. It may even have created one of those... how many people think of Mary Poppins when I say the phrase "a run on the bank"? It could have created a run on a bank. So they kind of took a conscious decision to dial down the heat of a really big story in order to sort of keep the public sweet or to keep the public calm. Remember when the power went out at Heathrow? And it was a mistake. It was human error. And the reporting of it, the news reporting of it was absolutely huge. Listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not suggesting for a minute that there's any kind of agreement between media organisations. I think the problem in terms of the news is the problem I've got, is we haven't actually got the confidence to say this is a really big deal. If something physical happens, like a power outage, we can process it. But someone uses the word ransomware, and the massive majority of us, hopefully not all, because I'm going to invite your calls on this subject in about 1 minute's time. You see a word like ransomware or cybersecurity, you don't really know what it means. Not enough of us know what it means. And I would say that almost all of the senior figures in our news organisations have no blimmin' idea what it means. So just take those three. There might be more. You've got Jaguar Land Rover. You've got all the airports, and you've got Marks and Spencer. How big does it need to be? A major automotive manufacturer, arguably the most iconic retail destination on our high streets, and the only means we have of flying in and out of the country. And all three of them have come under entirely successful so-called cyber attack. So why is this not a much bigger story? Why are these not combining to create a real sense of peril? And I suppose, I narrow my options a bit. You've got to possibly work in the sector to be qualified to tell us whether or not we should all be more worried or not. So, and the British Library, what happened to the British Library as well? So again, if these were physical attacks that were massively reducing an institution or an organisation's ability to do its job, Royal Mail, the Co-op, I'm getting my inboxes going bonkers now, then I'm pretty sure, or if it was an environmental protester or a pro-Palestinian protester, I'm pretty sure we would be all over it. Now, part of it, obviously, the bit I do understand, is that it's pretty hard for the Daily Mail to make you really angry with somebody whose name you don't know, who's sitting in a computer laboratory in an unspecified country, causing problems for a company that you have nothing to do with. But eventually it will reach you: Jaguar Land Rover, Marks and Spencer's, the British Library, airports. But you can't point at some person who's making you late for work and someone can come on the radio and pretend that it's going to stop ambulances or... Well, so do you see what I mean? So the simple business, the right-wing tabloid business of turning readers against other members of their own community for no particular reason, except that it's their business model, doesn't quite work with cyber criminals, doesn't quite work with ransomware. But that doesn't explain why the grown-ups aren't going in harder on this, why the grown-ups aren't doing more than this. About 300 million quid, apparently, the Marks and Spencer's business cost took a hit of. So I've got two questions for you, and the co-op as well. Yes, you've reminded me of the co-op. The first is, and sometimes when I ask you this question, the answers are absolutely fascinating. And I hope today is one of those days. How big a deal is it? How worried should we be about this? Can I put in a little bit alongside that question? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. If you know quite a lot about the world of cybersecurity, and I've met loads of people over the years who describe themselves as cybersecurity experts. Where the hell are they? You know, if you are in this world, if you are of this world, if you understand this world, am I wrong to worry that things feel a little bit out of control? 0345 6060 973. A side order to the first question of whether or not this is the institutional equivalent of those credit card frauds from a few years ago when the world and his wife seemed to get hit by it, but everybody kept it on the down low because presumably the banks didn't want us to know how unsafe our money was in their bank accounts, and they seem to have got on top of that now, and you've got verifications and all that kind of stuff going on. So that's just my own personal comparison, my own personal insight. And the other question, the big second question, is why do you think? Is it simply... And everyone can answer this, because I'm wondering about how you react to this. So I am feeling less concerned on one level, on an emotional level, than I did when they threw orange powder on the table at the snooker. I think that was Just Stop Oil. Or when they spray paint a picture frame. And that makes us go, grrr! Or it makes us go, yay! But it makes us do one or the other. We go, yay! Or we go, grrr! Technical terms, those. You might want to write them down. And yet, they've smashed up, virtually speaking, metaphorically speaking. They've smashed up Jaguar Land Rover. They've smashed up Marks and Spencer's. They've smashed up the British Library. They've smashed up the co-op. And they've smashed up all our flipping airports. And who's going, grrr? Or even, yay? Nobody. I know it's Monday. But if you were to get philosophical about this, you would find yourself thinking where the chicken ends and the egg begins, or when the egg ends and the chicken begins. Would we be going, grrr, down with this sort of thing more if the media was responding differently? Or is the media waiting for us to feel things differently and then report accordingly? But I'm going to do that little routine again because I quite liked it. Are you ready? They've smashed up Marks and Spencer's. They've smashed up Jaguar Land Rover. They've smashed up the co-op. They've smashed up the British Library, and they've even smashed up all our airports. And you could be forgiven for either not knowing or wondering why so many of the individuals and institutions that you would expect to respond in a very robust fashion seem not to care. So you could have probably preceded that 14-minute introduction under the banner headline, What's Going On? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 90 minutes after 11, and it is one of those mornings where I have either stumbled unwittingly into something that will, in the weeks and months to come, turn out to be a much bigger story than anybody else has given it credit for, or I've tripped over my own shoelaces again and landed flat on my face. All of these cyber crimes, these cyber attacks seem to be gathering pace, seem to be getting bigger, and yet the response seems to be a tiny, tiny fraction of what it would be if the attacks were somehow physical. Keith said, is it because you can't see a picture of a hack? You can see pictures of queues, though, at Heathrow. You can see pictures of people not being able to buy their sandwiches with a credit card at Marks and Spencer's. You could probably get hold of pictures of the Jaguar Land Rover production line having stuttered to a shuddering halt and cobwebs replacing workers. But yeah, he's got a point, hasn't he? There's something about the relationship between the virtual and the physical, or the difference between the virtual, well, which may talk to what we are discussing. Glenn is in Fleet. Glenn, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. Yes, I run a cybersecurity company in the UK. We've got about 200 employees.
Well, you're not doing a very good job.
Well, unfortunately, the companies you mentioned are none of our customers.
No, I know that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have teased you like that. And also, the last thing you would have done is ring me.
Absolutely. But look, I'm as frustrated as you are when I see this.
Oh, really?
I'm not a cybersecurity guru. You might see some posts recently that I've actually written out there saying things like Cyber Essentials Plus, which is something the government asks you to do, is not enough.
Right.
So basically, only 5% of businesses in the UK have taken up what you call Cyber Essentials. And that's if you're supplied to government, you have to have done certain things. So very few companies have done it. People do not take it seriously enough. If you go to a boardroom, most boards do take it seriously. The problem is they don't understand it.
Right.
That's the biggest challenge. So what they do is they go to that IT guy and they say to the IT guy, can you keep me safe and secure? And he goes, yeah, sure, I'm an expert in this and I'll keep you safe. But they're not. You have to be an expert. The best analogy I can use to you is that if you're David Beckham and you're walking down the street and you say, I need a personal security, provision for my family, for everything, take care of me. You wouldn't just go to a Wetherspoons and ask the bouncer outside Wetherspoons to come and be your personal security. You go to a proper company that understands it, maybe SAS trained or whatever it might be to take care of you. I think too many organisations in the UK are not taking it seriously enough.
That's fascinating. I really like that analogy as well. And there'll be quite a few board members listening, I imagine, from various companies who are thinking that's exactly what we did.
Exactly.
That's what I meant about it being something that in the media, at least, because of what I do for a living, I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle from you. I'm wondering why it's not getting reported with the sense of urgency or scale that it seems to me to deserve. And the answer would be because we don't understand it either.
Correct. If you look at most directors, they sit around that as a director of a company, you have to take health and safety seriously. So somebody tripping over, but most organisations, we're a services-led economy predominantly. You're not going to trip over the carpet in your office. But a board takes health and safety incredibly seriously and has to report on it. But cybersecurity, not so. And to me, cybersecurity should be at least as important as health and safety in an organisation.
Yeah, okay. All right, I've got an analogy now. Ronald McDonald thinks that cheeseburgers are delicious as well. Of course you think that cybersecurity should be really, because you've got 200 employees in the business of cybersecurity. So let me nudge you along, if I may. Let me bring another chicken and another egg into the conversation. I think I get now why you believe that, and I think you're right to believe that companies aren't taking it seriously enough. It's a great opportunity for businesses like yours moving forward. But leaving that aside, how do you account for what I would describe as muted reaction to all of the enormous stories that have been unfolding in the last few months?
I think you hit the nail on the head on some of the comments you made earlier, is that because if you can't see it, it isn't there. And I think that's what people see. Now, you're right. It is physically there if you go into M&S and the food isn't on the shelves. But I think people still are not joining the dots up between their hack and the impact it makes on their lives until it actually happens to them, or it happens, until they can physically see it. So
it kind of has to happen to all of us. It has to happen on such an enormous scale that the weight of concern becomes irresistible. So you'd be looking at, has HMRC ever been targeted? Do we know?
I'm sure most companies,
but it would have to be HMRC on January the 31st. It would have to happen in a way that made everybody who submits a tax return think that they were going to get fined for being late when they hadn't been late. Because we don't all buy Jaguars, we don't all go to Marks and Spencer's, we don't all go to the British Library, we weren't all flying around Europe this weekend. There's just not in. But then I can get a mob going by complaining about somebody sitting in the street to protest against climate change, because that's visual, physical.
That's exactly it. I think it's because it's physical. People can see it. They can.
This is so interesting.
And because it's a virtual crime, it's almost like it isn't happening. And just the sort of things out there, so just to make you aware of some of the impacts, you might not have seen some of these things. So people are using a lot of deep fake stuff. So one of the biggest crimes was a virtual Teams call that someone thought he was transferring $23 million because the CFO told him to do it, but it wasn't. It was a deep fake. So these sorts of things, QR codes. So if you go into a pub or anywhere into this pub and look at a QR code, just be careful what you're scanning.
I know about this one because someone might have stuck another QR code over it.
Correct. There are so many different opportunities for people to get in, and we've got a lot. One of the things that we should do as a country more, and we as a company do, is we support neurodiversity and neurodiverse people because neurodiversity lends itself to a lot of the skills you need in the cybersecurity world, and we as a country and as a government should be doing more to support that. And that's something I'm a big advocate of.
So you, man.
That's what we're trying to do. People like pen testers and some of the analysts you have. And if you look at places like China as an example, they at 6 or 5 or 6, they take lots of neurodiverse people, children, they will test them because they actually then they're the potential hackers of the future.
So you're setting a thief to catch a thief, for want of a better phrase.
Correct. Correct.
The same skill sets.
It's a cat and mouse game, basically.
I love this. So, I mean, briefly, because there's loads of people waiting to contribute to this. How did my little pontifications this morning reach your ears? Were you sort of going, oh, thank God, finally, someone seems to be waking up to how big a deal this all is?
100%. 100%. I wrote an article called Why Cyber Essentials Plus is Not Enough. And we put some stuff out on LinkedIn and various things to try and wake people up to this because it's going to continue and it's only going to everybody will get hacked. It's what you've done to be resilient enough if you do get hacked. And that's the challenge all these organisations have. There's something called the Cyber Resilience Act, James, that's coming out by the end of this year. Yeah. So that's going to mean that organisations have to demonstrate a level of resilience. And if they don't, the cyber insurance policy will be null and void. It's almost like when you're driving your car. If you've not done the right things for your car insurance is null and void. So people need to pay. Oh, yeah, it's huge. People need to pay attention to it. Yeah, it's okay. The government's trying to do some stuff, but I just think they need to push a bit harder.
Well, and I mean, again, I'm sorry, that's 3 chickens and 3 eggs in the space of 10 minutes, because of course they will push harder when the understanding of the danger is more acute. And I don't know who their online advisors are. I wonder if the government has the equivalent of an IT guy going, yeah, everything's fine. Will be cool. The Cyber Essentials certification does seem to be, as Glenn attests, very much a step in the right direction, but possibly not a step far enough. Also, the weird human thing that's going on here about the relationship between physical and virtual. It reminds me a little bit of the free speech conversation. In that this, and I know Elon Musk and others are doing it for very personal reasons and financial reasons, but the idea that if someone tweets something, it shouldn't be taken as seriously as if they graffiti it on the wall outside your house or shout it from a pulpit or a rooftop. It seems to me, do you think, or am I reaching too far? I'm not sure. Thank you, Glenn. Perfect start. Alex in Manchester. Alec, what would you like to say?
Hiya. Well, I think I can be quite short now because between the two of you, I think you've nailed it, really. We've got lots of skilled workers in the UK. This is a bit of a moral hazard. And your researcher compared it to the banking crisis. It's exactly that. We need to let companies fail so they take it more seriously. Investors should be asking, as the number one question, where are we with cybersecurity?
Why then would companies
have to be responsible for
but
this?
Why aren't they?
Because it's not big enough. So things like this don't happen enough for people to take it seriously. If your company relies on a computer system, you have to take it seriously. What's
your angle? What's your in sort of...
It's simple as that.
No, but what's your involvement, if you like, in the issue?
So, funnily enough, now none. But I used to do a lot of back-end web development and dealing with encryption, dealing with passkeys and whatnot now. So I still do a bit for myself. But yeah,
it's not your job anymore. I'm thinking oddly, in my own analogue way, I'm thinking of shoplifting actually, and how that has been going on in this country forever. And it's only in recent years when it's gone absolutely bonkers, and the security that's in place has been proved completely inadequate, and so many people have jumped on the bandwagon, and it's happening in the kind of places that it never would have happened before. And suddenly it's a national issue. Suddenly it's national news, and suddenly it's moving very firmly into something must be done territory. But I can't get, and this is what I want help with on 0345 6060973. I can't get the failure of the public to respond. So why don't I care more? I don't drive a Jaguar, but it's my neck of the woods. My dad was a correspondent on the Daily Telegraph in the Midlands, and a big part of his job was the car manufacturing industry. I am fascinated by it. I continue to be interested by it, even though I don't like motoring topics particularly. I couldn't buy my stuff in Marks and Spencer's with a card, and only by coincidence did I have cash on me. And all of the online operation, which we're quite fond of at O'Brien Towers, all of that was inaccessible. I flew to Dublin last weekend, but I didn't fly this weekend. If I'd been trying to get to Dublin and back this weekend, my entire plans could have been thrown into disarray. I haven't been to the British Library for a while, but do you see what I mean? That the potential impact on me is huge. These are household name institutions and organisations, and yet I don't feel. Why don't we all feel more threatened in the way that we would if gangs of people with sledgehammers were turning up at places where we do business and smashing up the equipment? That's a really important question. 0345 6060 973. And underpinning all of this, I think we may have got our answer, but there's room for more. How big a deal is this? What is going on?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 33 minutes after 11. As you heard in the news bulletin, Nigel Farage wanging on about foreigners again. This time, perhaps, as far as I can tell, this would involve him going after his own girlfriend, wouldn't it? If they were to scrap indefinite leave to remain. I don't know what her arrangements, or indeed his ex-wife, I don't know what her arrangements are, either as immigrants to this country, but it suggests he feels that the animosity successfully directed at people coming over in small boats may have reached saturation point, because now he's decided to go after people who are here completely legally and making valid contributions to our country, which just involves everybody foreign living in a form of fear. If only there were a word for politicians who subscribe to that kind of worldview. I've got an idea that he could introduce. If you are here and you're not a citizen of this country and you buy a house, let's say in Clacton or Frinton-on-Sea, then you have to provide publicly full details of where the money came from. Because, I mean, if it turned out that your own partner had perhaps been economical with the actuality, well, if your own partner claimed he bought it and then turned out to have been lying or, quotes, mistaken, end quotes, when he said that, then the question mark hanging over, because we've got a housing crisis in this country, Nigel Farage's got five houses, 5 gaffs Farage. Nobody calls him. And he claimed, of course, that he'd bought one in Clacton, insisted on the records that I've just exchanged on it. It turned out he hadn't at all. But a house in Frinton-on-Sea was bought by his girlfriend, who, according to some reports, I think the BBC did a good job on this, doesn't seem to have earned any money for quite a long time, or earned anywhere near enough money to buy a lovely house with a swimming pool. Oh, yeah, it's got a swimming pool, man of the people, for a very long time. So I think people here from foreign countries who buy houses should have to show us exactly where the money came from. And if it turns out that their boyfriend lied about it, then something must be done. Actions must be taken. But it's so boring to be proved right about everything on a daily basis by people who lean so extremely far right. But they never stop with small boats or with, quotes, illegal, end quotes, immigrants. They never stop there. If you are a racist, you have a problem with all people who are not exactly like you, even if you've got a foreign-sounding name. That's how it works. So first they came for the small boats people, and now they're coming, well, yeah, if you can be bothered, you can find out for yourself, because it will be in every news organisation, no doubt, until the cows come home. 11:36 is the time. Let's take a couple more calls on this, and then I want to pay tribute to somebody who's passed away, who was actually a pal of mine. There's a danger in this business when somebody in the same line of work passes away that we all sound like we spend our entire social lives hanging out with each other and all go to some secret club for the weekend. But I hardly know anybody socially from this business. They're not deliberate decision, not conscious, but we've got our friends are sort of drawn from all corners of our lives, and it never really gone down the showbiz dinner party route, or certainly don't hang out with politicians. At 1 or 2 occasions where I've done that, they've ended up being people that you would cross the road to avoid, let alone want to invite back to your house for tea and cakes. But you'll be aware that John Stapleton, the broadcaster, died this weekend, and he was a pal of mine, and I do want to say a few words in tribute to him. So I'll be doing that before 12 o'clock today, including the story of the most extraordinary dinner party experience, one of the most extraordinary dinner party experiences of my life. It's not brilliant in terms of shocking or salacious or anything like that, but it's certainly out of the ordinary and an illustration of just what a lovely bloke he was. So do make sure you're here for that. 11:37 is the time. Back to cybercrime. How big is it? What's going on? And the question for me now, because I did philosophy at college, you know, the question for me now is are we reacting completely differently to something that is very, very significant but, quotes, invisible, end quotes, compared to how we would react to an even less significant thing that was completely visible? I'm using the sledgehammer analogy. They've managed to metaphorically smash up Marks and Spencer's, airports, the British Library, everything. And yet, I don't know, I just have a sense that we're all being a little bit relaxed about everything. Neil's in Ecclesfield. Neil, what would you like to say?
It was more just to try and, I guess, help your questions. So initially when cyber first entered the scene, it was cheaper for businesses to put money aside to pay the fines than it was to actually implement the products to protect the environment.
What would you get? Sorry, this is an analogy with environmental stuff.
Just in general. So by environment, I mean the technical environment of the business.
Oh, forgive me.
So,
you can't use jargon with me, mate. Sometimes people think that I fake my ignorance on some subjects. It's entirely authentic and real. So I didn't even know you could get fined in this field yet for having insufficient cyber security.
Correct. So when the attacks first started happening on businesses and their computer systems, it was cheaper to pay the fine than it was to implement the technology to protect the environment. It's just how it was.
Okay, I didn't know that.
The EU implemented changes, which is what the GDPR regulation was, and the cybersecurity, which meant that if a business was breached, legally they had to declare to the government that they had had a breach. And the fines increased exponentially. Due to this, they then started spending a lot more money on a lot more systems. But when you change a system, and this could be anything from air traffic control to large supermarkets, there are huge amounts of systems that are incredibly outdated. As you remember with the NHS attack, the reason the NHS was brought to its knees was because of old systems that were just simply too expensive to replace.
Remind me exactly what happened in the NHS attack.
Someone was able to get through the front door, and then because they were able to get through the front door and there was no separation between each of the NHS divisions, they basically spread internally that from there on and basically brought it to its knees for a significant amount of time.
So no one could access their NHS records?
It was that they couldn't do patient files, they couldn't do scans. A lot of the older systems that were left in place were effectively rendered useless.
I mean, it's ringing vague bells, but I don't actually fully remember it. Unless you were waiting for something, unless you were caught up in the system at that time, it probably didn't resonate as much as it should have done.
You've just hit the nail on the head.
First time for everything.
Unless someone feels something, they don't necessarily do anything about it.
So why is it so easy to rile up people when someone chucks a box of paint at a painting or disrupts the snooker? Why does that work so well? Because it's visual, because we've got a visceral, physical reaction.
Exactly that, yes. So a really good example is, and in my case, my grandfather used to get hundreds of false spam emails and letters and things, and the visual thing for myself, obviously I work in the industry so it's a bit different, but for me, the amount of money that he lost that basically rendered him effectively with nothing in the bank, nothing to show, just because he wanted someone to talk to. Even when you talk to your relatives, you know, they thought that person on the end of the phone wanted to talk to them when actually they were just scamming them out of money. You often see it now where it's progressed, where someone will text, and this is very prevalent, they will text people that they know are of a certain age, normally in their kind of 40s or 50s, and say, you know, mum or dad,
I've seen all this.
I'm
I've
just
got this
stuck on
myself,
a night out.
actually,
Could you just send me
Luckily, I was sitting with my daughter at the time that my phone pinged with a message like that. So it was it was both
exactly
of them. So I don't want to get distracted from the central thrust. It's the same. You're talking about psychology now. You're talking about human reactions to humanity.
Yeah.
And a cyber hack doesn't feel human to your average Joe, but it does to you.
and also who they feel about it. So if you look at when people say cyber, they think it's people, in a dark room that live there.
I think of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
That's got to stop, hasn't it? I probably shouldn't have admitted that. You think I'm a right idiot.
It's teenagers. And I don't mean this, with a white brush.
It's terrorists and blackmailers.
It's older people. Yeah. And it's cyber war, so something.
Doctor Who again. Stop saying cyber war. It's Doctor Who again. I'm thinking of robots.
Yeah, but you're not wrong. I mean,
I am wrong.
Something they did see was when the war started towards the east, cybercrime dropped significantly for the first 2 years, and then it's been on the rise since. So there's that, and the thing that a lot of people don't think about is, and this is more so. What happens when a breach happens? They do it for a number of reasons, but normally it's because to cripple the business and to effectively ransom them, to get money out of them. We won't turn your systems back on until this.
So it never ends, this, until businesses take cybersecurity as seriously as they take physical security. They wouldn't expose their profits or their personnel, well, maybe their personnel, but not their profits, to this sort of threat on a physical level. It's like a Securicor van making its way around the streets at the moment. The cyber equivalent would just be a bloke on a Deliveroo moped.
Yeah, but it's the people. It's the business's information, but it's also they want to extract that data. If you think just yourself, for example.
Yeah.
Think about how many websites you've got your card details in, your username, your password. A lot of people don't even use password encryption. They just write them down or something else where there's tools out there, right? So if you think about that, let's say Marks and Spencer's or anyone else for that matter, your information's there and the attackers want to get that information out, so then they can target you with those text messages because they know that there'll be specific demographics that shop at specific places and therefore may be more vulnerable. And if they can get that information, they will then leave that attack behind them to leave the carnage. And most businesses, they have to look and figure out where it come from and what happened. And then,
it's the strangest conversation.
They'll then realise that the data's been stolen.
Yeah, of course, and that's why sometimes you get warned that your details might have been compromised. So two-factor verification whenever you can, all sorts. So these conversations with all my callers this hour, it's like the polar opposite of the last hour almost. It's everyone who's ringing in really knows what they're talking about and has interesting things to say. You must listen to this programme today and, hopefully think, well, better late than never, but you must have spent a significant period of time wondering what on earth is wrong with everybody, not to recognise what is threatening them, all of us.
Not at all, to be fair. We pick our battles, right? I pick my battles with my wife.
Yeah.
She says I look after the tech in the house. There's things that you want to scream to the rooftop.
No, but this is your job as well. This isn't just your home security.
Yeah.
So as a job,
a long period of time.
Well, you must be slightly surprised by how unseriously very serious people take it.
No? In many ways, but I genuinely do. But then the same could be said for anything in life, really.
Well, at some point, until it is, some things aren't taken seriously until they are taken seriously. But I've struggled to come up with a really strong historical precedent for this. The shoplifting thing is quite current. Shoplifting is a problem, but until enough people are doing it to enough people, until you see someone pushing their way through security at Marks and Spencer's. Marks and Spencer's getting a lot of love today on the show with a basket full of stuff they haven't paid for while you're queuing up to pay for yours. Then it hits in a different way. But I would have thought enough people would have been affected by all of the ones that we've mentioned and many of the ones that we haven't even got around to mentioning. To feel it, to take it personally, and yet we don't. I remember when I found out that my card got cloned years ago, I told you at the time, and the money had been withdrawn in Canada. And I don't know, that it felt so far away. I didn't know whether it was geographically far away or whether the fact that no one had hit me over the head. If someone had stolen my wallet, is this a good analogy? Someone stole your purse or your wallet. Would you feel the same as when they cloned your card? Or would it actually feel different despite the fact that the crime is more or less identical and the risk is exactly the same? I think it would have felt much more visceral to me if my wallet had been stolen. Not even in a physical attack, but if I'd been pickpocketed. A violation. I don't think I felt violated when my card got cloned. I wonder if this is another example of our species not having evolved yet to have the emotional reaction with technology that we need to have to stay safe. Cool. That got a bit profound.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:51 is the time. I get some weird messages. Lots of people asking me if they've been blocked. So I'm reading all your messages. I mean, why would you message me? I don't read out many messages anyway. Why would you start thinking that you weren't getting your messages through to the studio? And a lot of people telling me what time it is. So it's possible that I have been doing the time wrong. I often do, just to keep you on your toes. I didn't think I had done today. But if you're listening on catch up and I say the time and you look at your clock and you think, oh, James has got that wrong, I better let him know. Just double check that you're not listening on catch up and that the time I've said is actually correct when I said it, which was 20 minutes ago, and you're listening on who knew that catch up was going to throw up all of these potential problems? Here's one. You blocked me. Well, I obviously didn't, because here you are. Lo and behold. Happy days and welcome. 11:52 is the time, and I think I will now. Here is a little double example of John Stapleton, one of the greatest broadcasters. And I had a connection with John for a number of reasons, not least because he followed a similar path into journalism that my late father followed, and then I followed a similar path into broadcasting that John himself had followed previously. He died this weekend, if you didn't know, after what newspapers usually describe as a battle with Parkinson's disease. He was a lovely man, but he was also a brilliant journalist who could do that thing that we all aspire to do, which is do the light and the shade, the big stuff and the not so serious stuff with equal charm and ease.
No doubt there's a very warm relationship between you and Mr. Gorbachev. Nevertheless, I think he made it very clear in that speech this morning that he is rigidly opposed to any modernisation of short-range nuclear weapons in Europe, and has said that in his view, if that modernisation does go ahead, the whole peace process could to some degree or other be threatened. What's your response to that?
I wouldn't be too worried about those words in his speech for this simple reason. He has already modernised his short-range nuclear weapons, and he's got far more than we have.
My husband does nothing. Nothing at all.
I mean, not even...
He wouldn't know how to do it.
How long has this been the case?
25 years.
And he's never done anything. I mean, when you have a meal together, does he not even sort of tidy up the dishes?
No, he wouldn't know where they went. He wouldn't know how to... Well, he just wouldn't know how to.
Really?
Really.
Does he not? I mean, could he operate the washing machine?
No.
I think that was from The Time, the Place, which was a fixture of my student days. It's an interesting evolution there of how television has evolved, because The Time, the Place was a lovely show, and they'd set the studio up all over the country. It would tour the country and do topical talk show. And it got replaced by Trisha, which was obviously a more combative format, and then Trisha got replaced by Jeremy Kyle, which was obviously an incredibly combative format. That seems almost to track the nature of public discourse in this country, but John demonstrating there that he could interview prime ministers and then do the light-hearted stuff equally well. I think I met him when my wife was working at GMTV, and he found out that she was married to me and he'd been enjoying this show. So he invited us round to his house for dinner. And it felt a little bit like a sort of royal audience, because Lynn Foldswood, his late wife, and John Stapleton were about as close to televisual furniture as you could get for my generation growing up. And we went around for dinner, and he put us at our ease so completely. So complete. We don't do much stuff like that. It kind of, because otherwise all your weekends are taken up with socialising, and you don't see much of your kids, or you don't see your mates that you had from outside of the industry. But we went to that one. I'm so glad we did. Met some lovely people. John and Lynn were charm personified. So, and then we had them back to ours, and we didn't have a big place at the time. We could only fit 6 around our table, and we didn't know who else to invite. So I just invited our best friends. John's from Oldham, and my very close friend Andy, who I've talked to you a lot about, he's also no longer with us. He was from Rochdale, just down the road. And I was messing up the creme brulee in the kitchen at the time, which is a very hard recipe to mess up. But hey ho, cometh the hour, cometh the man. And I went back into the sitting room, or where the dining table was, and there was just this sort of stunned atmosphere in the room. And John Stapleton was going, "I don't believe it! And I thought, what have you done? This is just extraordinary, really?" And it turned out that my mate Andy, who was married to Mrs. O'Brien's best friend from school, my mate Andy his mum had gone out with John Stapleton when they were teenagers. And he'd not mentioned any of this to us. He said, "Well, I didn't know if he'd remember." And so by the time he'd had a few wines, he felt that he could, broach this confidence with this famous person that he'd met for the first time. And he said, "I don't know if you remember." And he said his mum's name. And John was, "Oh, goodness, man." He started talking about snogging in a bus shelter and all sorts of lovely little memories and connections. And the next thing we know, he invites us and our friends and Andy's mum and stepfather to his house for dinner. So we ended up going to this reunion of two people who went out with each other when they were 15. And that's the kind of bloke he was. He was so fascinated by all people, which is why he was so good at his job, but by people he'd had a connection with 50 years previously, 60 years previously maybe. He just couldn't leave it. He wanted to know more. He wanted to re-establish connection. And it was an absolutely lovely evening. A bit mad, a bit surreal. I kept catching Andy's eye and he'd just be like, what is going on, mate? This is mad. This is insane. But it was just lovely. I suppose it was a form of journalism in a way. So my very, very best wishes is to their son, to John and Lynn's son, Nick, and his wife Lisa, on a premature passing of a real legend, and there aren't many around, to be honest, and they don't really make them like that anymore. It is 11:57, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we return now to the question of cybersecurity and how we've ended up in a place where it's happening on such an extraordinary scale without any particularly extraordinary response. Mike's in Finchley. Mike, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Lovely story, by the way.
Thank you.
I led the response as a police officer for the NHS cyber attack on the Hertfordshire hospitals, and it was actually my team of special constables that recovered that hospital a day before the NHS response team were due to come on site, and it was a dystopian scene, to say the very least, when we first arrived at the hospital. It was like something from 28 Days Later. You wandered into this building with no lights on. There were people giving birth in darkness with machines beeping on batteries. It was reminiscent of a war zone. So yeah. Yeah, it was pretty insane. But the whole recovery, the whole recovery was due to the fact that the mutual aid call was put out on a Saturday. I was working, doing some other shifts in a different area, and I'm a technologist. I've been in IT for 30 plus years, so bread and butter. We had a team of special constables who were all from technology backgrounds, and we worked on sex offender management and cybercrime. And we pulled the team together. The guys came in and effectively did their day job in uniform for the NHS to get them back and recovered.
What year was this?
That was 2017.
Yeah, so and that was pretty big. 60 trusts were hit, 200,000 computer systems. But I was doing a bit of research before I came on air today. It's a first time for everything. There was an attack on blood services last June, in June of 2024. And that picture you just painted there of people, well, just that single sentence, people giving birth in the dark. It proves my point about it highlights my confusion about why this isn't a bigger deal, or why this isn't a bigger issue. Do you get that?
Yeah, totally. It's not tangible. You're not feeling it at the moment. It's hidden from you.
Yeah.
And so you've got multiple problems here. You've got continual outsourcing to third-party companies. And if you look into the Jaguar Land Rover piece, there's a large piece there where you've got third-party companies offshore with people uninvested in actually doing the job properly.
Yeah.
You've then got C-suites who've got people who've got a whole heap of arrogance, but very little in terms of...
This is the C-suites are the executives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's lowballing. So if you go back to the piece in the NHS Trust, as I said to your lovely person who answered the phone, you've got people there who are trying to secure a system. They're not getting the tools and the money they need to do the job, and they're not getting paid.
Because it's a cost at the moment, but it actually becomes a saving if they do it and then don't get hit as a result. I'm late for the... are you still in the force?
I used to, but no, I left a few years back, unfortunately. But
no, I just wondered whether you think the police take it all seriously enough.
Try to. The police try to. Yeah. But you've got to. Again, it's I mean, some of the work that I was involved in, I don't really want to talk about on the radio, but there, and it's pre-Watershed, but you would have people who were offenders who could absolutely run rings around officers because they didn't have the skills to really get into them. It's improved, and it was improving, but it's resources, it's training, it's the cost of doing things. I mean, to give you an indication, James, one of the clients that I work with now, at the start of the Ukraine war, we put some additional detection and monitoring systems on. And we received 1 million hostile attacks over a 3-day period coming into their internet-facing systems. And so to give you, if anyone sort of sits and goes, oh, yeah, we're not really at war. We are at war. It's just a different type of war, one that you can't see and it's not tangible to people at the moment. But at some stage, something will get through, and when it lands, you'll lose your car company. You'll lose your favourite greengrocers.
It won't be able to survive the attack. It won't be able to survive the damage done by the hacking.
If you look at it now, James, if you think about the amount of wastewater that's going into our rivers, and that's a conscious decision. What happens when valves are taken over and turned off? What happens when the water isn't being purified as well as it can be, or something's bricked and the whole system stops working really quickly? So people really, really do need to step up to the mark on this really quickly.
You're brilliant. Well, you sound like an evangelist, and I will return to this topic whenever I can, but I'm glad I didn't end up looking like an idiot, although having listened to all of these experts ringing in to tell us about how serious the situation is, I think objectively I might have preferred it if I did. I think I'll go home later today. I'd have gone home with more of a spring in my step if I'd ended up looking like an idiot this hour than I do having ended up, I think, being vindicated or validated in my view that something very serious is going on and not being taken sufficiently seriously. And and that thing about being at war reminds me of Carol Cadwallader and her warnings about what Russian propaganda was going to be doing, and fake people online attacking us, all the way up, sanctioned all the way up to the Kremlin. Just have a little look around the world, particularly the political landscape here and in the United States of America, and reflect upon the fortunes of politicians who are, let's say, very Vladimir Putin friendly, up to and including, of course, the well-known former Russia Today presenter. 3 minutes after 12 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 7 minutes after 12, and I caught a bit of Nick's show this morning, and I wasn't quite sure what was going on, because I kept hearing this. And I wasn't entirely sure why. It's kind of on in the background while we're trying to put our show together, and I thought it was a bit of light Mickey taking. I thought it was like clown music, and Ed Davey was coming on because the Lib Dems have got their conference underway as we speak, and it was kind of like saying, "Here comes the bloke who's always clowning about." And so I thought it was like circus music, and then I heard it again, and I thought, no, that's an actual marching band. So I asked a colleague, and as you know by now, Ed Davey arrived at conference at the front of a marching band. Right, special prize to anyone who knows what that thing's called. You probably need a bit more than that, don't you? The thing you twirl, is it just a baton? Or does it have a fancy... Is it just a baton? Or does it have a fancier name? A big old baton with a big metal orb on the top of it. Is it a scepter? What's the difference between a baton and a scepter? Gone a bit early to Mystery Hour this week. I would say that was more scepter than baton. But and he tried to, as he always does, Ed Davey, tried to get really stuck into the moment. He doesn't. Is sort of Johnson used to do a lot of gimmicks, and he'd pretend to fall over, and sometimes he would fall over. And he somehow simultaneously managed to convey contempt for what he was doing, and a bit of bonhomie, a bit of, oh, isn't he funny? What a wag! What's he going to do next? Ed Davey really throws himself into it. He really tries very authentically and very sincerely to engage with whatever nonsense he's doing in order to establish what? And that is going to be part of the question this hour. So we're going to talk about two things. It's a mace, apparently. Are you sure? Everyone's messaging me the word mace. Is it a mace? The thing about... And it's a mace in politics. Is it a mace when you're at the front of a marching band? Yeah, use them in Boys Brigade, apparently. I want to have two phone-ins. One I'm a little uncomfortable about because it's probably unfair, but I think it's important. And the other is a lot more straightforward. So I tell you often, in fact, I told you quite a bit in the last hour, that I generally, I tend not to socialise with politicians. And the reason for that is I don't want to owe anyone a favour. And I like to keep my options open. And I want to be free to put the boot in when someone deserves it, and that could be a little bit harder if you've been on holiday together or if you routinely meet up for lunch at one of your clubs or whatever it is that they do in that world. But it doesn't stop me having opinions about politicians who I have met, albeit that I've almost always only met them in professional circumstances. And that generally means full disclosure. I get the occasional politician in the studio, but I'd much rather listen to you. Or do a 45-minute monologue, and then have a politician sitting here refusing to answer questions. And I don't invite people onto full disclosure unless I expect to like them, unless I already have warm feelings towards them. You've got Leo Varadkar coming up, actually, the former Irish, the former Taoiseach, very much on that page, very much in that category, albeit that we don't agree on much politically, certainly not on sort of social policy, but he always struck me as a decent bloke, and therefore I wanted to meet him. I've had former Conservative politicians on the podcast, most recently I think probably Amber Rudd, Dominic Grieve, various other people with whose politics I wouldn't agree, but who seem to be decent people that I'd like to talk to. Ed Davey, and again, I don't want to curse anyone or jinx anything, Ed Davey's a really lovely man. He's a very, very rare politician and has a humanity that is probably innate, but if it isn't innate, it will have come in large part as a consequence of caring for his son, his severely disabled son. He is just a really lovely bloke. He's one of those people who leave you wondering whether there are somehow 28 hours in his day, because he gets so much done, not just shouldering half of the care, or a significant part of the care burden at home and raising his family, but also running a political party. And they had a fantastic result at the last general election. You can tell me why we see much more of Nigel Farage on our television screens than we do Ed Davey, when the latter secured way more seats in our parliament than the former, but he has done a pretty good job as leader of the Liberal Democrats by any available measure. And I suspect that they'll be overtaking the Tories soon, such as Kemi Badenoch's, how can we say it nicely? Fate. No, it needs to be a little bit more than that. Such is her success rate as leader of the Conservative Party. The Lib Dems will overtake the Conservatives, and unless Farage can find ever more foreigners to promise to be vile to, it may well be that the gap between those two parties, between Reform and the Lib Dems, closes as well. But I don't quite get it, and I never have. And it's pathetic for someone who does what I do for a living to still, 20-something years into this job, I didn't really do political journalism before I started work at LBC. I was the world's worst showbiz editor. I don't know what the alternative is that the Liberal Democrats offer. You can't argue with the fact that the threat to the two-party system has only really emerged in recent years with a politician who was prepared to be even more racist than the average Tory racist. So that I will be even viler to immigrants, and I'm going to make so much noise about how vile I'm going to be to immigrants that you will forget to associate me with the Brexit that I told you would be brilliant. I understand the difference between populism and popularity, but I don't know what the Liberal Democrats are. I've got one friend, I was at college with him, who's a Liberal Democrat activist, and we kind of agreed not to talk about it anymore because he'd get so cross with me and he thought I was being crass or glib when I would say I don't really see the point. And then you had the coalition in 2010 when Nick Clegg when Nick Clegg went into coalition with David Cameron and became the sort of handmaiden of austerity. Even harder during that period to work out what are they for? What do they do? What alternative do they offer? And I understand the argument of shaving off some of the sharper edges of David Cameron and George Osborne's plans, but I don't know that history will respond to that claim very kindly. And as we see multi-party politics in this country gather pace, the Liberal Democrats are going to be bigger players, I think. And the question of what story a party tells is one that I think the Liberal Democrats struggle to answer until I speak to Liberal Democrat supporters who can sometimes be the most committed and the most engaged political activists of them all. And so those are my two questions. What story do they tell? Why do you support them? Or if you don't support them, but you know more about them than the average bear, what do they actually stand for? What is the alternative that they offer? If I were to be lazy about it, I'd suggest that the Tory party has lurched so far to the right that the Overton window has moved and the Labour Party have moved with it. And in some ways, the Liberal Democrats might be a more traditionally left-wing party on some issues than the Labour Party. But I need you to tell me what they stand for. 0345 60 60 973. What is a Liberal Democrat in 2025? And then I want you to tell me what you think of, well, you can do it the other way around if you want. Well, I really like the stunts, but I am a bit more politically engaged than the average bear, despite my ignorance about what story the Liberal Democrats are currently telling under Ed Davey. But I know that he is a serious man with a unserious side, as most of us are. So I love seeing him swinging his mace around at the front of a marching band. I love seeing him windsurfing or whatever other nonsense he's getting up to, parasailing and stuff like that. I think it is a really humanising course of action that they've decided to pursue. But I know that some people in the party are calling on him to wind it in a bit. They think that it makes them not a laughing stock, but an unserious proposition. So those are essentially my two questions, one about the party and one about the leader. What do they stand for? Why do you like them? What alternative do they offer? In a world where it sometimes seems Labour, the Tories and Reform are competing on who can sound the most negative about immigration, why do I not know? Why do I not have a clearer picture of exactly what the Liberal Democrat position is on that issue? 0345 60 60 973. And then I tell you what, this would be a nice one if you've never rung me before. You sort of want to, but you've thought, oh dear, it's a bit nerve-wracking. It's a very straightforward question. What do we think of the stunts? What do we think of the jocular, the light-hearted, the funny stunts? Because I really, really like them. And I don't see any real negatives, except perhaps in the minds of people who are either determined to come up with a negative response or who have worked very hard to produce one. 0345 60 60 973. Where do the Liberal Democrats fit in to the currently quite bonkers British political spectrum? And what do we think about the leader's penchant for funny stunts? Hit the numbers now, you will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
So it's a twofold inquiry, really, a double-pronged question. I happen to rather like my local MP, but there have been times in recent years where I didn't particularly warm to the Labour leadership, and I would have been a winnable vote for an alternative party if it was worth voting that way in my constituency. I'm a bit of an anorak when it comes to voting systems and electoral chances. I fully appreciate that lots of people vote for the party they like in constituencies where that party has got no realistic hope of winning. But what I don't know, a couple of colleagues were talking about it this morning, as not having a story to tell, not having a... Brand is a terrible word, but there's not much of a brand for the Lib Dems. And in the course of my lifetime, there never really has been. It's not the case that Nick Clegg kicked the stuffing out of their reputation. It was electoral arithmetic that got them into government, not necessarily ideological purity or ideological promises. The tuition fees was probably the biggest thing you could have pointed at in 2010. And of course, they abandoned that as soon as they got into power, necessarily or not. So what are they? What is the Liberal Democrat message? What is the Liberal Democrat story? And we mention this because they're having their conference this week, although you wouldn't know it from the BBC. And the second bit of the question is about Ed Davey's affinity for funny stunts. Ed Davey, I think it's a refreshing change to UK politics, but I mean, if it actually puts you off, then I want to hear from you as well. 21 minutes after 12 is the time. I got a lovely text off someone who describes themselves as a former Liberal Democrat campaign organiser and therefore doesn't want their identity to be revealed. So, and that is making some brilliant points. So stand by for that. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Feel free to criticise me for not knowing more about it myself, but just do it in a text. Don't waste a phone line doing that. I do plenty of self-flagellation in the course of the average hour without you having to join in, because it doesn't answer my question. I can't believe you don't know this. Doesn't answer my question, does it? An answer to my question involves you telling me what it is that appeals to you, what it is that constitutes their message or their story, and what it is that they offer, not currently being offered by any other political party. Let's go to Mark, who's in Ipswich. Mark, what have you got?
Hello, James.
Hello, mate.
Long time and all that, long time fan and all that stuff.
Welcome.
I've spent the weekend with what I would say would be a Lib Dem voter, a new Lib Dem voter. My older sister, I can't speak for myself, but she has hated the Tories since Truss, so only very recently, but she didn't hate Johnson, so I'll let that go. But her new home, I think, would be Lib Dem. She lives down near Marlow and Henley, down that way.
Yes.
And we spent the afternoon in Henley on Saturday.
Lovely part of the world. They have a lovely literary festival in Henley. So, I mean, Liz Truss has done the other way, of course. She started off a Liberal Democrat and now is slightly to the right of Genghis Khan. So she's got a blockage with Labour, your sister. Not to be unkind, but she is one of those people who could never bring themselves to vote Labour for whatever reason, regardless of how right-wing they end up being. It just would never quite work for her.
Exactly. She's been Tory for a long, long time.
But she's been repelled from the Tories rather than drawn to the Liberal Democrats.
Yes.
So this isn't going to help me at all, then? You're not going to be able to provide me with any insights into what they stand for at all?
Well, at least she's not repelled so far to the right that she'd go reform.
No, I get... Well, so that's it.
I'm speaking on her behalf, but...
they're a Tory alternative, but they're not reform. So they're a Tory alternative for people who aren't obsessed with immigration.
But as your researcher said, they soiled themselves in the coalition, so...
That's a generational thing, isn't it? I mean, certainly for a long time, it looks as if they'd never recover from that. But politics, a week is a long time in politics. A decade and a half is even longer. And I think Ed Davey has successfully shrugged that off, hasn't he?
Yeah, but for a party with, is it 70 or 75 MPs?
Yes. Don't get anything like the coverage you'd expect.
No, and that's, well...
So if I said to your sister, what do you like about them, what would she say?
I don't think she's impressed with Badenoch. It shouldn't be about personal...
yeah, but what do you like about the Liberal Democrats? Not what do you not like about the Tories? What do you like about the Liberal... What's her favourite policy?
Do you know what? When we discuss it, it's like I'm not going to go down the Tory road, but at least
and that's it.
At least I know.
Well, that's maybe a new voter. And Ian Dale actually has written a rather good article in the Daily Telegraph today. Probably part of this new policy they've got of not printing unhinged headlines, so that we lose our lovely unhinged headline feature, or we have to start relying even more heavily upon the Daily Mail, who of course came to the rescue today with a claim that recognising the state of Palestine could see Britain facing £2 trillion in reparations. If you missed that, remember you can rewind live radio. £2 trillion is roughly double what the entire UK spends on public spending in a single year, but that doesn't stop the Daily Mail from pretending that it's a realistic possibility. But the Telegraph aren't doing any unhinged headlines at the moment, and it's frankly not fair. They've even got Mr. Sensible, Captain Sensible himself, Ian Dale, writing today about why Badenoch needs to worry more about the Liberal Democrats than she does about Farage's outfit. And Mark's point, or at least Mark's sister's point, kind of speaks to that. And that makes some sense, actually. You can't all compete for the same nativist, borderline racist vote. If you want to restore Tory fortunes, then you should perhaps be tacking towards the Lib Dems. But what is attracting people to the Lib Dems? I'm one call in and I'm no clearer. Andy's in Colchester. Andy, what do you reckon?
Morning, James. I think it's because Ed Davey and the Lib Dems have quite simply stuck to their principles. They've not been swayed by the right wing. Like Labour have, obviously the Tories have. They strike me as not being worried about Farage, which I think is a really good approach to take. They've got their 72 MPs. Reform are going to have to win so many millions more votes to get to displace the Lib Dem ones. And I think people like me, who voted Labour, held my nose and voted Labour last year, are now deeply disappointed, but not remotely surprised with the way the Labour government are going about things, are going to naturally lean towards the Lib Dems next time.
Depending on constituency arithmetic, I presume. I think a lot of people are likely to be casting votes to keep certain characters out rather than wanting certain characters in. And you feel a bit like that, as if you can't tell me what is... I mean, in policy terms, do you know what you like?
Yes, I like their pro-European stance. Yeah. I like their net zero stance, which is just to say, look, we've got to look at the future. There's no choice. I just like. I mean, I live in a town that for years was a Lib Dem constituency. It's got its first Labour one, and she's very good. But for years we had Lib Dem before Will Quince got in with the Tory vote in 2015.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've always liked their sort of calm rationality about their politics, really.
Yes, I mean, they do. I mean, it's a funny one. I wonder how much of it is our fault. How much of it is down to the fact that because they're calm and rational, with a few exceptions, but as a party, as a policy platform, they're calm and rational, and therefore, in a world of clicks and giggles, they don't get the attention that they should get, that they deserve to get, and they've calculated that the only way to get it, for good or for ill, is to chuck Ed Davey out of an aeroplane.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I can do without the gimmick, but
I quite like. Do you not like the? I quite like the gimmicks.
I mean, they're nice and everything, but I think the bigger picture is that Davey is a principled politician, and there's not many of them about anymore. Who has stuck to their abiding principle, which is just to be slightly centre of the left. You asked earlier where they are in response to everybody else. Well, obviously Reform are far right. The Tories have veered so far to the right they're almost there as well. Labour,
well, I think honest Bob Jenrick is arguably even further to the right than what Farage is saying publicly at the moment.
Yeah, they're all doing it to try and, in a perverse way, to try and counter Farage. It's almost like they're trying to out-Farage Farage. Whereas the Lib Dems have just said, you know what, we're looking at the bigger picture here. It's not all about immigration. There are far, far bigger issues in this country that need solving. Like what they've said about the NHS, like what they've said about public spending.
And they do offer, though, on immigration, they are a bit more, a lot different from all of the others. I think it was them in May who, I know it was, wanted to scrap the ban on asylum seekers working if their claim had been pending for more than 3 months, which would be, arguably, to everybody's benefit, the idea of people earning a legal crust and paying tax while these incredibly slow wheels that were, of course, scuppered by the last couple of Tory governments continue to turn, despite the current government's best efforts to get them to turn a bit quicker. I mean, listen, we'll have this argument another day, Andy, I'm sure, but I think that he's not the only principled politician. I think there's plenty of principled politicians on the Labour front bench. It's the pragmatism of power that sometimes sees those principles dilute, and the Liberal Democrats provided a masterclass in what can happen to principles, however dearly held they are, once you actually get into power, when they did get into power in 2010. But I'm not in any way denigrating or diluting the rest of your analysis. I think we sometimes forget the scale of the mountain that Keir Starmer is and was required to climb. No excuses for the amount of slips and footfalls that he's made, but equally the mountain is huge. So and they've called out Musk as well. Ed Davey has called out Musk, again slightly populist in the sense that we could prosecute somebody in this country for saying something in another country about our country, albeit that he said it on a screen at a rally organised by a serial criminal in this country. It doesn't make him I don't know, but at least he's acknowledging the scale of the problem posed by Elon Musk and his platform in the same way that he's acknowledging the idiocy of complaining about people who aren't contributing to the public purse and banning them by law from contributing to the public purse. Still a flimsy framework, though, in terms of what it is that they stand for, the story that they tell, the person they appeal to. Keir Starmer would say ordinary, hard-working people. Not necessarily to the exclusion of people who can't work or people who are extraordinary, but that would be they all argue over ordinary, hard-working people, but who do the Liberal Democrats have ownership of? In a previous life, at this point, I would have said vegetarians, but happily I'm much more mature now.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:34. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I think one of the daftest things I heard during Donald Trump's state visit. Well, do you remember on Friday we were mapping the right wing's attempts? The same mouthpieces, actually, that today are just parroting Hamas propaganda. It's extraordinary, really. But the same people were trying to portray Keir Starmer as having been, embarrassed by Donald Trump. So what you do, you take a self-confessed sex offender who's a multiple felon, who tried to launch a coup against his own government after losing an election that he continues to lie about. A man who's been accused of rape on many occasions, including by one of his former wives, and who continues to lie as if it is going out of fashion. So here is he, who we are sadly, as a country, reduced to having to suck up to, because such is his power, such is the power of his role. And then on the other hand, you've got Keir Starmer, former Director of Public Prosecutions, who has not set the world on fire as Labour leader, but who has not done any of the things that you don't even need to go there, do you? And I heard people saying, Donald Trump looks like a leader and Keir Starmer looks like a lawyer. And you found yourself thinking, do these people inhabit an alternative universe? So it's not even that they're pretending that the crimes don't matter, the self-confessed sex offending doesn't matter, the suing a woman for libel who accused him of rape and losing doesn't matter, the launching the seditionists and the insurrectionists onto the Capitol in D.C. who were baying for the blood of his own vice president doesn't matter, continuing to lie about the 2020 election result doesn't matter. I mean, I understand how much effort you must put into keeping your eyes closed and your ears blocked if you're pretending that Donald Trump is anything other than a depraved, delinquent menace. But to end up claiming that his public performances are somehow impressive and imbued with a sense of leadership is beyond parody now. It's beyond funny. And it is the same people, isn't it? The people that brought you Brexit, the people that brought you Boris Johnson, the people who've brought you genocide in the Middle East, who are today parroting Hamas propaganda lines, the people who brought you Liz Truss, the people who brought you all of the bad stuff, are also the people who, in a way, bring you praise for Donald Trump if they think it's a way of attacking Keir Starmer. So I played you a little clip last week when he was at Chequers. And just imagine for a moment that Joe Biden had got his countries mixed up. So I should tell you that there has been a conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia for many years, which is now happily in a period of peace. And here is Donald Trump talking about his role in bringing peace to Azerbaijan and Armenia.
To think that we settled Azerbaijan and Albania as an example, it was going on for years. was never going to be settled. If you remember, the Prime Minister, the presidents, they were there for many years. They said, when they were in my office, we settled. And they started off at both sides of the Oval Office, so far away. I didn't know you could be so far away. And as we were together for an hour, they kept getting closer, closer. And by the time we finished, we all hugged each other.
So that's it, great. He's a leader, not a lawyer. Happily, at the American Cornerstone Institute Founders Dinner this weekend, he was able to set the record straight about that conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia.
And now they're sitting in my office, and they're at the Oval Office. It's pretty wide. And they had one over here, one over there. And slowly, over the course of about an hour, they came close. And at the end of an hour, we were hugging each other and holding hands. It was an amazing thing, and we settled that war. That was not settleable, as the expression goes. Cambodia and Armenia, it was just starting, and it was a bad one. Think of that.
Cambodia and Armenia. Also, I've got to play that one again, because that's not an expression, is it? They said it was not settleable, as the expression goes. Who here hasn't heard that expression before? I mean, it's up there with a Rolling Stone gathers no moss, isn't it? Or a stitch in time saves nine. Unsettleable, as the expression goes. It's a bit like saying, as the expression goes. But you'd have thought somebody might have had a word with him after he got Albania and Armenia mixed up next week. But perhaps that someone did. I said it could have been worse. You could have said Cambodia.
And now they're sitting in my office, and they're at the Oval Office. It's pretty wide. And they had one over here, one over there. And slowly, over the course of about an hour, they came close. And at the end of an hour, we were hugging each other and holding hands. It was an amazing thing, and we settled that war. That was not settleable, as the expression goes. Cambodia and Armenia, it was just starting, and it was a bad one. Think of that.
I think he says, as the expression goes, when he's worried he might have just made up a word. Doesn't he? So that's an extraordinary level of insecurity and narcissism. So he's just about bright enough to realise that he might have just made up a word. And rather than be embarrassed by it, he'll pretend it's a very well-known word. So that's why he says, as the not settleable, as the expression goes. I mean, how many times would a word have to be used in common parlance to qualify as a well-known expression? More than once, I'd have thought, regardless of what your politics are. But anyway, at least he took the opportunity of a memorial to the murdered Conservative activist Charlie Kirk to step back from his previous attempts to make political capital out of it and to resist calls for more unity, or to try to use it as an opportunity to improve political discourse in a country where, of course, many acts of political violence have been undertaken by his supporters, and where, of course, the biggest act of political violence, mass act of political violence that we've seen in recent years was inspired entirely by him on January the 6th. So fair play to him for being a lot more committed to calming things down than he had been previously.
In that private moment on his dying day, we find everything we need to know about who Charlie Kirk truly was. He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great, great purpose. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica. But now Erica can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent.
Okay. Oh, what a lovely tribute that was to a man whose death was possibly a consequence of, or probably, I think you can say, a consequence of of his politics, albeit that despite the desperate attempts of Trump and his allies, there has still been no particular success in proving commitment to a particular cause. That's just horrible, actually. Absolutely. But anyway, he's a leader, remember. No, not a flipping lawyer. Who wants a lawyer? You can have a leader like that talking about how much he hates people at a memorial service for somebody who appears to have been a victim of hate. Tony's in Taunton to steer us back. You don't hear the word hate in the context of the Liberal Democrats very often, or indeed in the context of Ed Davey, but some people hate his stunts. Why did you ring in, Tony?
First of all, James, can I say thank you for bringing this particular topic up?
Yes.
And for your warm and generous assessment of the party.
You're very welcome.
It would be nice if we... Yeah. For me, there's one line in the party manifesto that puts up exactly what the Liberal Democrats stand for, and that is the phrase, no one should be enslaved by poverty, ignorance or non-conformity. We are about fairness. We are about making sure that everybody has their opportunities. Everybody can get the support that they need to do the best they can in life.
I would have said that was a broad left position, but the non-conformity bit is, in a way, even more interesting, because that is something that the Liberal Democrats seem to treasure more than any other party does.
Yes.
What do we mean by it? What do we mean by it?
It's you do not have to live your life by the rules of other people. You can dye your hair a different colour. You can have partners of whatever you choose. You
Liberal.
Can, yeah.
About a proper liberalism. And that is probably why I made that slightly pathetic joke about vegetarians before the last news bulletin.
That's fine.
But that fits into what you're describing, doesn't it? You don't. People who are frightened of standing out in a crowd, or people who are, it's, in a way, non-conformity is the opposite of fascism. Fascism would be like compulsory conformism.
Yeah.
And the Liberals offer something different. Why, as someone who's clearly been on board for a very long time, how frustrating has it been over the years that it hasn't been translated into more political capital? And I suspect, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that when it was, with Nick Clegg in the chair, many opportunities were missed.
And I think, to be honest, we have actually learned from that.
Yes.
There was the first opportunity we had. We tried to do a lot of good things, and I think we did. But equally, we made some mistakes. I'm quite happy I would have had a mistake. Okay, on these particular issues, we made mistakes. We will learn from it. And to be honest, that's what we want everybody to do. You can make as many mistakes as you like, as long as you learn from it, and as long as you don't go into the situation of repeating the same mistake over and over again, expecting a different result.
Which brings us back to Nigel Farage, doesn't it? I'll give him another chance. Seriously, it's got to go right eventually. What about the stunts?
I can honestly say that I've taken part in some of those stunts. I went down to a couple of the constituencies where we were doing the by-elections, and I'm there in the crowd if you ever look.
Are you really? Because I'm watching now. The BBC have finally come around to acknowledge that you're having a conference today, and they're showing him at front of the marching band with what everyone appears to believe is correctly termed as a mace and not as a baton.
It is a mace.
It's a mace. Well, how do you know? Who made you the expert?
I was in a marching band between 1970 and 78, and I think we ended up 16th nationally.
Well done. So the band, yes. Yeah. I was going to say that's even by the Liberal Democrat standard, that's a bad result. But this was the marching band that came in that came in 16. And I'm watching him, and his arm is slightly out of kilter with all of the professional marchers. But his face, the smile on his face, I think he's an almost impossible person to dislike.
He does enjoy these things. He really does.
Yes,
and I saw him at a march quite a few years ago, and he had his daughter up on his shoulders, and I took a selfie with him, and it was just such a joy to be there with all like-minded peoples and to just enjoy the idea of just being together and sharing a common purpose.
Well, you're a credit to your party, a credit to your cause, actually, and so is Ed Davey. And maybe today's not the day for pushing too hard on the question of why more cogs don't mesh. So you could probably be on board with an awful lot of what the Liberal Democrats stand for, and yet somehow never really contemplate voting for them, which is a phenomenon people like Tony and indeed Ed Davey have been battling with for all of their political lives. It's 12:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10 minutes to 1 is the time, and we often only mention people when their lives have come to an end, so I should give a quick nod to a former resident of this parish who celebrated his 100th birthday on Friday. I speak of Pete Murray, who, when it comes to broadcasting in this country, is a former resident of pretty much every parish going. But I know people who fondly remember his time on this radio station will join me in wishing him all, albeit belatedly, all the very best for the big 1-0. It occurred to me, I wonder how many former LBC presenters, because in London we're still on 97.3 FM. I appreciate most people are listening on DAB these days, but when I started here, that was it. You could listen on 97.3 FM or not at all. I wonder how many presenters, past or present, well, there is none present, I think we can safely say. I wonder how many presenters on LBC have managed to overtake the frequency over the course of all the years, the 50-odd years that we've been on air. So Pete Murray has done that. He's now gone well past the 97.3 and hit the big 100. So congratulations to Pete and best wishes from all of us. 12:51 is the time. On a altogether more serious note, and indeed something else I picked up this weekend. I said in the first hour I'd mentioned this to you, and I forgot. You've kindly reminded me that I didn't. It's a report from ACLED, which is the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data. And they are backed by various Western governments and the United Nations, tracking reports of losses in Gaza. Almost 15 of every 16 Palestinians killed by the Israeli military since its renewed offensive in Gaza began in March have been civilians. I'll say that again. About 15 out of every 16 Palestinians killed by the Israeli military since it began its new offensive in March have been civilians. Something perhaps worth bearing in mind as we examine some of the rhetoric responding to the recognition of the United Kingdom and now well over 150 other countries of the Palestinian state. Anyway, back to the Liberal Democrats, who were, I think, fully behind this recognition, possibly ahead of Keir Starmer in terms of calling for it. I'm not 100% sure, and I wonder whether that is part of the problem. Peter is in Reading. Peter, what would you like to say?
Hi, afternoon, James.
Hello.
I imagine Layla Moran would have been very keen for that,
yes,
given her heritage. I just want to comment on the fact that I'm a member. I quite like the stunts. I think they're quite funny sometimes.
I do too.
I think it's also necessary, unfortunately, because the media landscape in the UK is still very much conservative and or Labour, whereas a lot of the conservative stuff now has shifted to reform.
Yeah.
So Nigel Farage walks into a pub and there's 20 camera crews there.
Yeah.
GB News is probably live broadcasting it. We put out serious policy statements. They barely get touched. So what does that have to do? You have to jump off a crane or out of a plane or do a marching band to get the cameras to show up.
Yeah, you do. And then you have no control over what they report. So they might turn up and film you jumping off a crane, but they're not necessarily going to reveal what your policy is on getting asylum seekers into work or on recognising the Palestinian state or on what do you? I mean, I don't want to do a gotcha because you've rung in and made your point, but what would be the things you point at as the policies you're proudest of?
I'm originally from Europe, so for me, the Lib Dems was a bit of a natural choice.
We're all originally. I'm originally from Europe, but you mean the European continent?
I'm from Belgium originally, so that's the heart of Europe. So for me, that was a big appeal. I would never really call myself either right or left.
Yes,
I think I'm what you call a centrist, and I quite like the social liberalism that we have.
I think the problem with the European angle, which an awful lot of people have picked up on in my inbox, is I agree with it completely, but it doesn't feel feasible. So
I don't think we'll ever go back in.
No,
I hate to say that, but closer relations should be. It's a no-brainer.
The Labour's doing that, or they're doing what they feel. They're going as far as they feel they can.
But why have we got tariffs with Europe? It's crazy.
Well, they do have a free trade agreement with the European Union, I suppose. Have we got tariffs with Europe? We've got friction. I don't think we've got actual.
I don't work in import or export anymore. But when it first happened,
they've added
a small amount we had to pay.
They've added friction, and there are charges, but I don't know that they're technically tariffs.
And just the paperwork. I mean,
but the answer to that is because we're not in the customs union. So there's not. I mean, short of joining that, which would be Oh, crikey, look at you hijacking me with a Brexit conversation. I haven't had one of these for ages.
It's been a while. I thought
it has been a while. I just got a message off Jamie saying, when I mentioned Pete Murray, I only listened to LBC back in the 80s. I only came back because of your viral Brexit videos. God knows how we've managed to hang on to you, Jamie. I haven't had one of those for years. But I don't think they can change the terms of trade with the European Union as non-members unless they join the customs union or do a Switzerland, can they? I think we know that. But Liberal Democrats would try harder to achieve.
I think for the general election we had like a 4-step plan to get closer trading with Europe, and I think the idea at the end of it was customs union or as close as possible too, which I think it's a no-brainer really. It should be the case.
You've raised Brexit.
That's very much a red line with all the other parties. They don't even talk about Europe.
No, you're right, and increasingly confusing as to why they don't. Particularly as the party leader most responsible for delivering Brexit is the one that's currently riding highest in the polls. Did you miss the benefit of Brexit that was announced this weekend?
Can I give a very quick real-life example?
No, I'm joking. I'm saying, did you not see?
Right.
There was a benefit of Brexit
my
announced.
Bananas are straighter now, yeah.
No, a real one announced by James Dyson, the vacuum cleaner man. Do you want to know what it was?
Go on then.
Are you ready for? Are you sitting down?
I'm not, and I haven't got a chair near me, so this could be a shocker.
Okay, well maybe lean against something. Are you leaning against something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Here it is, James Dyson on Brexit and what we should be grateful for, because contrary to a lot of reports, it turns out we did actually get a massive win.
You were optimistic about Brexit because the Brexit vision, for many who were optimists, was freedom from the shackles of the EU. Was it compromised to the point of pleasing nobody, the deal in the end?
I don't think so. We've got our freedom. We can make trade agreements with other countries outside Europe that Europe can't make trade agreements with, free trade agreements. And I think much more than that, it gives us an independence of spirit.
Oh, that's good. Did you know that? Are you all right, Peter? Are you still with us?
Much better now.
An independence of spirit, Peter.
I'd also want to see the list of countries that the EU can't do deals with, because that's interesting.
And that we have done deals with. Independence of spirit, eh? I had no idea mine had been taken away. So 2016 to 2019, 53 to 1972. So I was well into my 40s before I got my independence of spirit back. And I'd spent my entire life, well, almost my entire life, not knowing that I was trying to live a life without... Who here doesn't feel suddenly and magnificently and indeed measurably improved, their lives enhanced by the restoration of the independence of spirit that we'd been labouring along without for so long? Thank you, James Dyson. I'm told he really hates it when people call his products Hoovers. So make sure you never do that. Oh, hang on. I can call it a Hoover because I'm exercising my independence of spirit. Makes Hoovers, apparently. That's it from me for another day. We will be doing it all again tomorrow from 10. If you missed any of it, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player and the LBC app. You can stay up to date on the top stories. You can put your news categories in the order you want. You can pause live radio. You can rewind live radio. You can listen to a range of podcasts, all on the official LBC app. Download it for free now from your app store. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.